G'day and welcome to Deeper Meaningfuls with Furzey. Let me just say, I learned something on every podcast, but this one blew my mind. I am chatting with a woman named Melissa Kupsch, and she is a homeopath. Homeopathy is something that I honestly couldn't have really told you anything about before this podcast. It's a truly fascinating topic. We talk about what is homeopathy, how it compares to allopathic medicine, which is just regular Western medicine, what kind of things it can do for your health. I mean, some of the things that Mel has been able to help people through are really amazing. She's helped people recover from endometriosis. She's helped men quadruple their sperm count. She's helped couples who have been having a really hard time conceiving fall pregnant. She even tells this amazing story about her sister who was going to have to get her gallbladder removed, went on Mel's homeopathic protocol that she assigned to her and fixed the problem. Didn't have to have any surgery. I'm going to do a consultation with Mel myself, and she's going to see if she can help me with a couple of things, motion sickness, allergies. So I'll report back to you guys when that's done and see how we go. She's a very intelligent woman. She's really done a lot of research and she's helped a lot of people. This is a really great podcast. Share it with your friends. Check it out. I hope you enjoy it. Here's Melissa Kupsch. I started the last podcast talking about toothpaste as well. I don't know, maybe because we're here digitally trying to look our best, and it's all teeth and smiles and bright eye. Have you done the eye drops? Have you done the teeth? Yeah, welcome, Mel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. We met under interesting circumstances. You were all dressed in white and looking phenomenal at your wedding, and I was playing some music.
Yeah, and I showed my sister the clip that I had seen from your music agency.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, Ash, look, I've really quickly," because obviously our wedding was planned very last minute. I said, "Look who I've managed to get. Look at these guys." Immediately, she's like, "Do you know who that is?" No. She's like, she pulls it up on the computer. She's like, "That is his name, Mark." Now she's stalking Rick, and then he's like, he married a Laurel. Look, her name's Laurel. It's him. I'm like, oh my goodness, it is.
Yeah. It's because it's been so long now that people kind of think that like they went to school with, like I went to school with their cousin or something. They know me, but they don't know where they know me from.
Yeah,
and then I never know whether to go, "Oh, I was on Home and Away," because that's not a cool thing to do. But then, do I leave them and do I just go, "Yeah, I don't know how you know me"? Yeah, so it's awkward either way. But yeah, that's me. Yeah, so yeah, my wife, she started the wedding music agency and roped me into it, and I'm having an awfully good time doing it. It's a beautiful day. Yours was no exception. It was a really beautiful day. Congrats.
Thank you. And yeah, I can imagine just being there for people's high moments. Like, you just like being paid to sort of like party and embrace the vibe. Like, of course.
Yeah, and it's a drastically different vibe to playing in the corner of a pub with drunk people. It's still drunk people at weddings, but usually more joy than belligerence. So it was a really lovely day. So you are a homeopath.
I am.
I got so many questions. I need you to kind of hold my hand with this and walk me through like I'm a 5-year-old. Can we define a few terms? What is allopathic medicine and homeopathic medicine? What do these things mean?
Yep. So the homeopath goes by the law of similars. The allopath, which is pretty much the way that all of our Western medicine is sort of founded, that is based on the law of opposites. So when you're looking at it, the allopath, our medical doctors today, if you, let's say, roll your ankle and it's swelling up, they're going to give you anti-inflammatories. They want to do the opposite to what your body's doing. If you're running a fever, they want to give you something to stop that fever generally. So they go the opposite to what your body's immune function is trying to do. The homeopath views that inflammation as a good thing. That's a healing response. That fever is a good thing. It's a healing response. And so we try to support the body from within to get over the symptoms rather than suppressing from the outside and sort of overwhelming and dominating the body. So we really go in opposites. So Hippocrates, who's sort of considered the father of medicine. The allopaths, they take the Hippocratic oath when they're sort of sworn in as doctors, do no harm, and all the list of those. But Hippocrates said there are two ways to heal, the law of opposites or the law of similars. So we just took two different routes. And my personal opinion on it is that the law of opposites is brilliant when you're in a first aid sort of emergency trauma situation. You're in a car accident, you want to go straight to the hospital and get the law of opposites. If you're having a heart attack, law of opposites. But for chronic disease and complex diseases that pretty much, that's 90% of what people are so sick with these days, they want the law of similars, but they've just not been exposed to it. They don't know how well it works. So, that's what we're sort of changing at the moment.
Yeah, okay, so that makes perfect sense, because if you are, if you're bleeding, you need to reverse that. If you've got a big gash in your arm or something, you want the bleeding to stop. But it also makes sense to say if you have inflammation, you probably have inflammation for a reason, and to suppress that inflammation is suppressing your immune's natural function, right? It's obviously doing it for some reason. So what's the counteractive danger of doing that? I don't know the answer to these questions, but that obviously your body's doing it for a reason. So finding the sweet spot of when to do the opposite and when to work with your body is probably the key to true healing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's got to be when I mean, you kind of mentioned, you kind of answered the question then, but I was just thinking, when is the time when you do want to do the complete opposite of what's going on with your body? Injuries, right? Yeah. So there's surgeries.
The emergencies, pretty much anything that homeopathy can't do, then I would let them. But it's incredible how little you would actually need other intervention if people did honor the law of similars like throughout their life. So let's say your child's got eczema. You start suppressing it with steroid creams. We've got fevers as kids and we're using Panadol, Tylenol, fever reducers, and we're literally just sort of thwarting the body every time it's trying to sort of strengthen itself through an immune response. And I guess this is where it comes in, and we have to look at the body is actually so intelligent. And the inflammation on the skin or whatever it is that the body's going through, it's often that is the healing response. The symptoms aren't something that need to be band-aided. They are the healing response. So you want to try and help the body get through those symptoms, because we don't want eczema forever. We don't want asthma forever. Yet that is the body's response to the internal imbalance. And you see this over time. If we're going to look at, let's say, eczema, and the child has eczema, and then you use steroid creams and you start suppressing it, what is very, very common in practice is we then see children with asthma. So it hasn't gotten rid of the disturbance on the skin. It has forced it inward, and the body has to find another way to express this disturbance.
You're describing me as a baby.
Oh, right.
Eczema into asthma.
Eczema into asthma. And then if you use, let's say steroids and inhalers and, even the long-acting ones, so you suppress the asthma long-term, sometimes that can be driven deeper and manifest in like the mental and emotional sphere. So, and we know this with kids, they can get aggressive if they're on like with their cortisones and all of that. And so you can see this, like the organism wasn't able to express itself and it's getting suppressed, and we just keep cutting off arms of expression until ultimately, and it's sort of like this hierarchy goes deeper and deeper, oftentimes can land in the mental sphere. And if we want to undo all that, you sort of got to step back. So in homeopathy, when we're treating someone for asthma, their eczema almost always comes back onto the skin. That is the law of cure. This is the symptoms coming back out. It's very obvious. And so you see somebody starts to feel better mentally and emotionally. They say like, my depression and anxiety is like fully lifted. I don't even know what's going on, but I've got this mad rash all over me. That's the body very smartly turfing things out onto the surface.
Right. Wow. So, I mean, this is, it seems just so common that we are in the Western medical standard, GP practice of medicine, that we are treating symptoms and not getting any deeper than that. Like, oh, you've got a headache, take something to make the headache go away. But why do you have a headache? That's the real question. But that's kind of, and obviously this is a very simple version of that, but we don't go there, and things like asthma and eczema, I think are probably more cryptic to try and figure out the why, but still, I've been on this journey recently about trying to figure out my asthma, and I've been talking about it so much, but I've recently changed my breathing and only to doing nose breathing. So when I'm speaking or singing, I breathe through my mouth. Otherwise, I breathe through my nose, and I'm off all my asthma medication.
Amazing.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And I'm 37, first time in my whole life. It's amazing. But this is something so interesting, how I'm no longer treating the symptoms, because I was never treating the why with the medication, with the corticosteroids or the Ventolin, the rescue inhaler. It was always just suppress the symptoms, either more long-term with the preventative or short-term with the rescue inhaler. There was never anything about how to stop why it's happening, where it's coming from. Can you shed any light on where that kind of thing comes from, and how would you approach something like asthma?
Yeah. And I mean, modern medicine, they can't do that because they don't know how. They don't actually have tools. There are no drugs to really heal and cure. And that's sort of like something that people don't realize, but they admit it. They are all palliation, sort of just suppress. But to the homeopath, the way that we approach it, in terms of the cause, oftentimes this is an inherited tendency. You'll often see the asthma, eczema, allergies, hay fever. This runs down family lines most often. There's a susceptibility there, usually. Or there can be a big onslaught of toxins, which throws the body into a really inflamed state, and then the symptoms can come on. So if you're exposed to, a lot of heavy metals or toxic substances at once, the body can react that way with asthma and eczema. But with the inheritance coming down family lines, what they would usually call, sort of like DNA and your genetics, right? It's just your makeup. The homeopath sees as it's the energetics, the energy that is flowing through your body is slightly distorted. There's just an imbalance here that we need to get back in line. Now, it's with the homeopathic medication, so they're called remedies. So what we do is we harness from nature frequency from all different substances. So all different plants have a very unique vibrating little frequency, and it has a very unique symptom picture. So what you would use it for. So what you would use chamomilla for, like chamomile, is very different to what you would use sulfur for, the mineral. They have very different vibrating frequencies. Science is more and more alluding to us, just telling us. There was an article in the Atlantic maybe 6 months ago, and it said it's confirmed. Scientists now know that we live in a vibrational universe. What we are perceiving, what we are hearing, and they're saying human beings pretty much are made up of light, energy, sound impacts our body profoundly. It's all energy. On the lowest levels, we are just humming, vibrating energy. With the homeopathic medicines, we are stimulating that vital energy. That's where the healing comes in. So the body mounts a response. So I would say that disease symptoms are distorted energy. And then how does energy actually get blocked and distorted? Well, we can inherit it. That's not a problem. We can fix that. Also, toxins, they can warp our energetic expression. If somebody was to, ingest a lot of mercury, you're going to get disease symptoms. It disrupts the energy. But the mental and the emotional traumas, that's probably the biggest one I see in terms of distorted energy and then physical symptoms. And this is more and more coming into the mainstream sphere. But the correlations that you'll see in homeopathy and the mapping of disease presentations as a result of certain sorts of trauma and emotions. So whether that's grief, I'll just give you 2 examples, say.
Yeah.
When somebody goes through something really shocking and they have grief, just hit them, very common sorts of examples of things can be twitches, muscle spasms can start to develop.
Yeah.
You can see the thyroid, most definitely just completely blown out. You can see changes in like the eating patterns. So people can just stop eating. They can become like overeating, like comfort eaters. And all sorts of like physical things, like sighing a lot for women is very common, like, and it's suppressed grief, but this is how the body manifests it. They go, and they will do it throughout the day a lot. Now, these are all just little telltale symptoms that will point you towards like a remedy prescription. But if you compare grief to something like anger and resentment for a woman, or like sexual abuse, the way that her body responds physically is very different. So you get things like UTIs, bladder infections, this sort of sphere, usually if it's abuse or something like that, and resentment. Now, what's so crazy is that when you use a homeopathic medicine that matches that disease picture, you see everything that's been suppressed come up to the surface, and then the symptoms go away. So we are that, mental, emotional, spiritual creatures, physical, it is all tied into one. And medicine only acknowledges the physical and they suppress it. So.
Wow. Okay. So what does that mean when you say all of those things come to the surface? How does that manifest? What would you see?
The anger. So let's say with a lot of my patients have experienced sexual abuse or birth trauma or something where they've been dominated, like their body feels like they've been, abused.
Oppressed, yeah.
Exactly. And then the anger can sort of bubble under. Now, anger turned inward for too long often looks like depression. Like a lot of these mums, let's say with the birth trauma, they think they've got postpartum depression, but they're actually angry deep down. When they take the homeopathic remedy, so most often it's going to be Staphylos aureus, and it comes from a plant. When they take it, the anger comes up and they are just like tearing shreds off like that.
Oh, wow. So they literally, their mood changes.
Literally. Oh, yeah. And a massive, like emotional, people will often cry.
Yeah.
They will be having thoughts of things that happened a long time ago. And they'll be emailing me saying, I honestly never realized how much this affected me. And it can be things like a parent's divorce, like when they were kids, like kids are very sensitive. So picking up on all of those traumas up to the age of 7 are pretty profound, but it can be literally, and oftentimes it's not the thing that the person would think that it was. It's really interesting, but the body is so intelligent, and the energy within the body, when you think about it, like, the moment of conception, the sperm reaches the egg and it's a blast of light under the microscope. You see a blast of light called the zinc spark. That divine energy, that very intelligent force, knows how to knit together your baby's eyeballs and the spinal cord and like the blood balance and the kidneys. It's this fully functioning, incredible organism with no conscious effort from the mum. It has its own intelligence.
Yeah.
But the mental and emotional intelligence is the same. And so if you go through something traumatic, oftentimes the body's just like, yep, I'm just going to park that. I just cannot deal with that right now, especially for children. It's like, stack that away, maybe till they're older.
Yeah.
But that can cause diseases. And I'd say that's probably one of the biggest causes, even of things like cancer. People think it's, there's definitely an energetics that we can inherit that make people more susceptible to things like cancer. But it's a massive, emotionally sort of like traumatized in the cells.
Wow, you're blowing my mind. So it's, because it seems as though that the kind of complete layman's understanding that I have of medicine and health is treating it like it's like the body is an engine, like we're a mechanic. There's this part, you need to fix that part. That part's broken. And then everything else is all good. We need to replace that part. You got something wrong with your kidneys, get rid of the kidney. And it really doesn't appear as though it's not working, because we haven't, there's people are not being cured of things. They're just having, again, as we talked about, symptoms suppressed, and they can live like that. Maybe they're probably certainly not thriving. Maybe some people are fine, but maybe they're not as good as they could be. And then there's a lot of people that are far less than thriving. They're struggling, but they're alive. Whereas what you're talking about sounds very much as though it's a much more holistic understanding of trying to get to the root of where this is coming from, and emotional issues are causing physical things to manifest.
And I mean,
I'm sure people want to go, oh no, that's just some woo-woo shit. That's not, that's nonsense. How does that make sense?
Yeah.
But clearly it does.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the things, so my dad is a GP, so he would prescribe a lot of medications. But even when you're looking these days at IBS, so many people have irritable bowel syndrome. They've got severe, whether they're saying it's intolerances or, whatever they're saying it is, it gets sort of thrown under this big umbrella of IBS. They are prescribing anxiety medications and antidepressants because they realize that it is the mental and emotional component that is causing the upset in the stomach. Now they're sending them with referrals to psychologists to say you need to go sort your brain out so that your stomach can relax. Now that is true. They're sort of on the right path. But again, the drugs are not going to get to the true root, because what I would say is it's a spiritual disturbance. Like the energy of the whole organism is thrown out. And if you can just get the energy of the whole organism brought back in, people do thrive. And then they're not anxious. And then all of the tone, like we've got nerves that run from the mind all the way down to the gut. So if you're stressed, yes, you're not going to digest properly. You might have all these gut issues. But it's real, it's energy. That's what I would say. It's energy. So the homeopath, we work most like the acupuncturists, where they're using needles to stimulate the flow of energy throughout the body. Yeah. We ingest a frequency and that lights up that divine intelligence. So it's like you kick up the energy in your body, and it is so smart. It knows what needs to be healed. It knows what emotions need to be turfed out. You just can't hold on to like anger and grief and resentment like long term and not expect to see the body start to give out. It's just not made to live with that.
Yeah, it's so powerful, isn't it? People living with constant stress and anxiety, it'll make you sick. I completely believe that, and I'm sure you know it to be true. It seems as though, and just even from a philosophical perspective, it just can't be healthy. It's not nice to be around, and it's certainly not nice to be when you are in that place. So I'm kind of hippie like this. I think that all things are connected. And why do I have to give the caveat that makes me a hippie, that I think that our mind and our body are connected? Anyway, that's something I need to deal with. But, for all the skeptics, I'm a fucking hippie, fine. But, the mind and the body are connected. And if you're constantly living in a state of stress or anger or depression, that how is your body going to feel good? How is your body going to thrive? How many people are really walking around with this perfectly functioning immune system, digestive system, sleeping really great, but yet they're super angry in their mind? It doesn't seem to line up.
Yeah. And then you go back to the definition of like, what is health? Because if we're just going to say that health is the absence of disease, well, not really. If you look,
it's a pretty low bar, isn't it?
It's a very low bar. And even if you look at the statistics, it's like the number of people who are anxious and depressed, even children, 1 in 7 little boys is now said to be medicated sort of to be able to sit in school, and, the ADHD and with everything that's coming through. And at what are we calling like normal? Like it's not, it's really difficult. And we are sort of living in a world that it doesn't really honor the human being or the human spirit. So it is actually hard. You've got to be a bit of a rebel if you want to truly thrive, I think, in this world. The old advice doesn't really cut it.
And you're totally right with that, because it is a tougher road to go by. I think there's something that I've observed, which the desire for people to belong, and because we need other people. If we don't have other people, we die. We know that to be true with infants. If they're not touched, if they aren't loved, and they don't get any physical touch, they will die. And that goes into that's deep within us as we become adults. Like, isn't it interesting that the worst thing you can do to a person who's in prison, like maximum security prison with all these other murderers and rapists, is put them on their own? Like, that's a fascinating thing. So my point is that we need other people. So this desire to be with other people and fit in with other people is really strong. But sometimes the majority is on the wrong path. I mean, look how unhealthy we are as a society, you know? So in order to start thinking about the things that we're talking about and looking at these different woo-woo hippie methods, if that's what we need to refer to them as, that actually work, that's a challenging road socially because people are going to dismiss you. You know, I remember I went and saw an Ayurvedic practitioner one time because I was trying to get I get bad allergies and asthma, which I'd love to talk to you more about. The asthma I think I've got under control, but the allergies are still around. And I went to try someone different because I'd been to so many GPs who they could give me nothing but drugs that didn't do anything. And I went to see an Ayurvedic practitioner and I put a post about it on my social media somewhere. And one of my mates made this, you know, this comment about how, he says something like, oh, Confucius says that you'll be going to a GP in 3 weeks' time. You know, just complete skepticism completely shut me down about the fact that I was even exploring an alternative outside of the Western medicine. But yet when you know, I personally have firsthand experience of just changing the way that I breathe and now almost curing my asthma. I don't really care now what people think of me, and I want to have more conversations like this and share this knowledge because it's true. I don't give a fuck if people don't like it. Yeah. It's true, and it's going to help people. You know, so like the road that you're going down with this is it may not be what is so mainstream yet, but I mean, if people want the truth and they want to pay attention, I think it will be more mainstream.
And it's really interesting when you look at the history of homeopathy and just a lot of foundational truths about the world in general. There was a time, you know, only 100 years ago, and there were homeopathic hospitals all over the world. So in the US, they had over 100 hospitals, big, you know, multi-warded hospitals, all of the beds lined up, and they only used homeopathic medicine. So through Spanish flu, scarlet fever, cholera, all of these like really deadly back then diseases going through, you've got hospitals dedicated to homeopathic medicine. Now, people these days have a hard time believing that that really existed because it's so suppressed. But what happened back then, I mean, homeopathy was founded by a medical physician, and then his following was largely all medical physicians back then. You know, we're going 250 years ago. So they were a massive force to be reckoned with. And during those diseases and those sort of epidemics back then, it was very clear what system of medicine was superior when it came to saving people and keeping them alive. And all of those mortality rates from the hospitals, you know, you compare the allopathic to the homeopathic was superior. And I can say that legally because it's all documented and it's
just what happened.
It's what happened. It's history.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to like it, but it doesn't mean it's not true.
Exactly. And so J.D. Rockefeller, you know, in the last 100 years, then, you know, he's realizing, wow, like pharmaceuticals, you know, they can be made from petrochemical drugs. So up until that point, I mean, J.D. Rockefeller is considered the father of modern medicine. Really, he got it going. But he himself had 3 private homeopaths who looked after the Rockefeller family. So
of course he did.
At the same time, he says to the universities, I'll give you, let's say, $1 million on one condition. You must stop teaching homeopathy here. And they can't believe that would happen. But in the US, it's just fascinating. If you look up the actual laws around it, at that time, they said, if you are a medical doctor, if you are found to use homeopathy for anything, you will lose your license. Not only that, if you consult about a client with another homeopath, you know, if you bring one in for a conversation to just differentiate treatment with a homeopath, we will revoke your license. And this happened to many people. So when the husband
you have to keep this secret.
It
You are
was
not.
so suppressed. It was like, we need to stomp this out now because
Wow.
we're talking trillions. Look at the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Trillions of dollars that would be lost. And so you look at the Queen of England. I mean, she's gone now, the Queen Elizabeth, but she had her own private homeopath. So do all the royals. They've got like that one homeopath who serviced all of the British royal family. And she, the Queen of England, who is what? One of the richest people in the world, she would not travel without a kit of homeopathic medicine to take with her. And she said, famously, homeopathy is what cured her allergies. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, you should definitely be seeing a homeopath. That is for sure.
Yeah.
But why have the richest people in the world been using homeopathy? And
I mean, she's got access to any type of medicine that she could ever need. She's got access. So the fact that she's choosing that, and the fact that she was very old and lived in a very stressful life, and she made it that far, she was doing something right. And now that you're shining light on the fact that she had a homeopath that followed her around and had her kept her in check. Well, that's got to be her secret.
And even Rockefeller, like, he lived into his 90s. And so, like, you can pump out the pharmaceuticals and you can take over the medical schools and you can stomp out a lot of truth and make it look like your option is the only option, which is what they have done for many years now. But we are absolutely at a point where people are realizing, wait a minute, like, this isn't working anymore. We're getting to the end, I would say, of the true, like, antibiotic era where we, as kids, our generation, it was like, oh, just take antibiotics. And now they're realizing, whoa, we're destroying their gut and their immune system. We're wiping it all out. And people are sort of like, okay, I can see the damages and the dangers of this system, but I actually still don't know what to use as an alternative. Because
what else do I do?
People need medicine. We're always going to need medicine. But what if there was a safer, effective, holistic way that we could, strengthen the human body from within? That is what they would not want.
Yeah, you mean medicine that people can take for a short time that they don't have to keep paying for and creating profits for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I mean, it was Rockefeller, right? Is that what a savage move. Like, that is, I was talking to a guy recently on the podcast about narcissism, and he was breaking down what true narcissism is, and he was saying how basically true narcissism and psychopathy are pretty close to each other. It's basically just a complete lack of empathy and an insatiable thirst for power. And that sounds exactly, and he was like, the world's run by these people. And that sounds like a perfect example. There's a guy who realizes that there's a way that he can make money, and it happens to be creating pharmaceuticals, but yet knows the way to actually get healthy. So he does that for himself and then fucks over the rest of society by making sure that the thing that he's using to get healthy is suppressed. That is brutal.
That is brutal. And it is. The world is run by brutal people, and also people who have been indoctrinated since birth. And so we've seen that the last couple of years, that people, if you're trained enough, and they're really trying to condition people. It's like a big social conditioning thing of, like you were saying, don't step outside of the norm. Don't get rejected by your community. I remember at, the start of, like, say, the last of the pandemic, and I was saying to my dad, oh, and I could just see it was just like breaking out. And I was like, oh dear, this is not going to go well for me.
Here we go.
I was pregnant at the time, and I was like, oh man, I just don't want, I just don't want to be doing this. And my dad's like, oh, sweetie, it's like, it's, our biological sort of evolutionary conditioning to want to be liked, because you don't want to be rejected, from your tribe. That could mean death back then. He's like, but you're all right. He said, if you get rejected, you're not going to die. So just, march to the beat of your own drum here going. And in that, you really attract your crowd of people who do see the world quite differently. And that number grows by the day, because at the end of the day, if we're going to look at modern medicine, it's in shambles. I mean, you can't medicate people any more than they're currently, like, it's just, they're destroying health.
It's not working.
It's not.
Like, it might be keeping people alive, but how? why are people not being cured of these diseases that have been around for so long if it's so effective? I mean, it might make you feel okay, but I don't want to just feel okay. And I know that if you really ask people, a majority of people will be like, everyone will be like, I don't want to just feel okay. I want to feel great.
Yeah. And I think even feeling okay these days, it's like you're lucky if you're feeling okay. With the amount of people I see, people are just being crippled, largely mentally and emotionally, but then they've got sick kids. And so then the parents are getting crippled by it.
Yeah.
Everyone's being affected in some way, like I would say, with everything that's going on. But
oh yeah, I mean, I completely resonate with what you were saying before about the pandemic. We were actually pregnant as well when all that stuff kicked off, and I tend to kind of get a bit obsessed and go down these rabbit holes of doing research of stuff, and kind of one foot in, one foot out with these kind of conspiracy theory things. So all of that stuff, I was like, ooh, I don't like this. Something's not right here. And I was talking to Laurel about it and trying to figure out what the right decision was to make. And I was like, I don't trust this. I don't want to do it. And in turn, and I didn't speak out about it. I didn't say how I felt publicly because yeah, we had a baby on the way, and I was like, I don't want to bring this shitstorm into our house. We're trying to bring a person into the world, and that's the main focus. But now that that's all happened and it's panned out the way that it's panned out, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I didn't get vaccinated and do any of that, but I'm not glad about the way it's affecting people and the countless amounts of information that's coming out about how many people are being injured by this thing. It's really dark. It's awful.
And it's like you start to look at it far beyond even just medicine. This is like, we've been indoctrinated about so many things. Like, how much are we under the thumb of these people who, I mean, have the power? Do they really have the power? I don't really think they do. But in looking at their actions lately, and it's like if you even follow like the World Economic Forum and all of those sorts of things, they're sort of clutching at straws. And I'm not sure if they're about to completely implode and this is their last ditch attempt. That's my sort of feelings on it. I feel that we are going to be fine, but maybe we're in for a bit of a rocky, because even fertility,
they're not going to let go without a fight
easily. But I do think that we will be all good. But yeah, in my work in fertility, it has plummeted. So I worked, 6 years ago. It was very different to the rates that you see now. And if you ask like any midwives or
what do you mean? Just people being able to fall pregnant?
And then also increase in miscarriages, stillborns, postpartum hemorrhaging. Something has, and I mean, since the vaccine.
In what time period?
Certainly the last 3 years.
Really?
Yeah. Probably like the last 2 years it's been the most notable, but absolutely the statistics worldwide reflect that something has happened. And
wonder what it could be.
Yeah, when we're looking at it homeopathically, when I'm trying to help people detox from some of these things, the results of it, like they are passing massive clots, and the body, we're trying to power up the body to sort of detox, but it appears to have affected, I mean, not even just the vaccinated. I'm not sure how far those rabbit holes are that you were going down, but it seems to be that it has affected a lot of people. So when we're talking about the hemorrhaging, like in our Brisbane hospitals here, where they, a lot of the midwives are telling me they used to have maybe one hemorrhage a week. Now they've got teams dedicated to people like postpartum hemorrhaging, and with all of the stuff they're trying to work on, it's just, even in the home birthing, they're saying something is very different. And so, my job as a homeopath is always the same. Try to strengthen the human being as much as possible, and then let their body address that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just referencing what you're talking about with the depth of the rabbit holes, I mean, I remember reading something about shedding. I don't know what that means. I don't know how true that is. But something's happened.
Something has happened.
And we may never know exactly what's going on, but that's frightening. And how long does that take to rear its ugly head? Again, we don't know.
Don't know. And if you Google sperm counts 2045, like you literally just type that into Google, Google will tell you that we are expecting to reach a sperm count of 0 potentially as early as 2045.
Whoa.
It's like 22 years that some scientists are putting that out there. And even if it's like, let's say that's the worst prediction, right? So that's pretty full on. But even if we get to the point where we all need IVF in order to conceive, and we're all reliant then on a system, to help us make a baby. Because if you look at the statistics for sperm, we have been on a steep decline for quite some time. So the truth is that at some point, we're going to bottom out at 0, where like the human body is just not able to reproduce unless we now take it very seriously and we stop doing all of the things that are just toxic, that destroy sperm. And but it's like that should be on the news. That's what people need to hear about, like how important it is to look after your body, because we're looking literally at the end
extinction
of the human race. And
it's not funny, but it's like, that's kind of serious.
And as they sort of push out some of these more transhumanist like sort of things and talk about, we'll be immortal, or they'll hook up our neocortex to the field and it won't matter. It's like, maybe this is why they don't care so much. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the more time it goes on, the more I think like how wonderful that documentary, The Matrix, was. It's becoming more and more of a documentary as all of these things come out.
Absolutely.
That's well, that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was hormone optimization for males and females. Firstly, what is your specific area of expertise? Is it fertility?
Predominantly. I trained in everything, but I just started to attract that and I just went with it. It's obviously a very busy field, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah, okay. So yeah, and that's something that I've heard about with the sperm counts decreasing, testosterone levels just naturally decreasing in men, women having a harder time falling pregnant, more miscarriages, and a pandemic or otherwise, that's still been happening. That's frightening. And what are you able to share about how people can, like, how can we fix this? What can someone do? What can someone not do in order to just optimize their hormones?
The biggest thing, and I bet you've researched this, that I would recommend is getting in sync with the circadian rhythm and the light diet, like getting good sunlight first thing in the morning sets up the hormonal cascades throughout the day. So that would be number one, because a lot of us spend a lot of time on screens. So that is the blue light. We want to mitigate the effects of that with as much red light throughout the day as possible. If we go back to what our ancestors did when they were super fertile, they're outside. The sunlight on our body does so much more than just give us vitamin D. The light rays from the sun in the morning, that red light, it goes through our retina and it triggers within our body a cascade of hormones to be released. And then if you see a sunset, likewise through the retina, and it tells the body, all right, start making melatonin, get ready for bed, start to relax. Then when you actually fall asleep, the body gets into cleanup mode and it cleans you all night. But the problem is that we are living so far out of sync with nature. So we're on our devices in bed, eating a lot of the time, and our body never gets the chance to actually clean itself like it used to.
Right.
So that's something. And when we're talking about fertility, the two professions that I've seen, definitely the nurses most affected, male and female nurses, because if they're doing their overnight shifts under fluoro lights, their body is so confused about what time it is. Like they're just so out of whack.
It's also a very sterile environment too.
Yeah. And the body just doesn't know, what am I meant to be producing when? I am so confused. So the periods, everything gets thrown out. Same with flight attendants, because they're hopping across time zones.
Oh, yeah.
The body just never is settled. So they are notoriously, affected fertility-wise, those two professions. And it's because we are not living in sync with nature. And this goes far beyond just light. This is having our feet on the ground. I'm not doing much for your hippie stance, but it's true.
Hey, I'm all about it. If I could grow my hair out, I would.
Yeah. I love it. And it is like, yes, standing on the earth and actually absorbing all of that electrical energy. We are electrical beings, but we're wearing rubber-soled shoes. We are cutting ourselves off even from the power of this earth, that we are a part of nature, but we are acting like there's nature over there.
Yeah.
And this is us in my little house with my blue light and everything I've got going on. So you really need to morph back into nature as much as possible, because that energy, I mean, you've got homeopathic medicine, but you get it better from the earth, like take it straight from the earth. So
again, what you're describing is creating an environment for your body to do what it naturally is capable of doing. Is just get outside, be an animal, be a mammal.
Yep.
You know, spend some time under the sun with your feet on the grass.
Yep, exactly.
It sounds pretty nice.
It is. And that's the thing. I think when we embrace it, life will be so much better. And this is the other thing. We were not made to work the way that we work now. No. It's insanity that we do what we do. Women particularly, we should not be working like men. Like, as much as, you know, it's great that women have the ability to work, our hormones are not set up to work the way that men do. Your hormones are much more stable. But for women, ours sort of like peak and trough throughout like the menstrual cycle. So there are times when we need to like rest and go slow. But if you've got a job that's something like a lawyer or something full on, your hormones, like, it destroys it. This is why how many women's thyroid is completely blasted. A lot of women have thyroid dysfunction, and it's that they've reached almost like this adrenal fatigue. They've got burnout. They're chronically exhausted, anxious. And it's not just the hard workers these days. I'm seeing it's the people who are scrolling even on Instagram, and their mind is constantly overactive. They are stimulated and they are absorbing way too much, and it's stressful. Like, go back 100 years, our ancestors didn't have to deal with half of the stimulation and the overwhelm that people feel these days. So you want to get back to like that. You want to try and cultivate some slowness and some peace and not feel like you're in a rush.
Yeah, again, mental state, peace, stillness, a lack of let's get rid of some stress. You know, too much work, too much scrolling, all these things are the mind, really. Well, the work is a physical thing, but your mind is driving you to no, you keep working, keep grinding. Yeah. Which is then in turn manifesting itself in physical, obviously emotional, but physical burnout.
Yeah. And let's say with men, right? Something that I have to talk to all the men about when they've got low testosterone, like poor sperm quality, is in what aspects. And when I really dig into their lives, it is so fascinating to me. So I'm talking about the men who have like almost zero sperm, like it's really full on. There's something very wrong with their hormones.
Right.
And it's like they might have a mother.
Can these be young men, like 20s, 30s?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, that's bad.
Yeah. And to the point where IVF is their only option because they've only got, you know, a few sperm that are appropriate. So that's what the doctors are telling me. I'm saying let's recalibrate that. But when I dig into their case history, things that I see that are really common is things like either a really dominating mum or possibly a dad, but oftentimes it's the mum, and it's this demasculinating sort of thing of just being dominated. Like, this guy's got no voice. He can't speak up for himself. He's at work. He's just sort of like, yep, yes, sir, no, sir. And then at home, oftentimes it can be the wife. It's very obvious in a consult if like the wife wears the pants and he's just sort of sitting there like, yep, like they can't express themselves. Now, when it comes to testosterone, they've proven that things like, you know, say, you want to be able to feel like a man in the healthiest way. And they've said, I saw a study once that was talking about men who are outside chopping wood can increase their testosterone by, you know, like 4 times the amount over X amount of period. And the thing is that it's the feeling of being a man. It's not about the work, you know what I mean? The actual physical swinging of an axe. It's feeling, I feel like a manly, accomplished, like sweaty man,
Yeah.
then the body responds, and that's when the testosterone kicks up. Then he smells better to his wife and he's more attractive, and all the consequences of that. But you can imagine with these men who are sort of acting like, doormats in their relationship, the testosterone starts
Emasculated.
to cripple.
Yeah.
And then they start to, it's like sort of a downward spiral of when testosterone is going down, then they feel worse. They're more doormatty, and it's down, 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 down. Whereas, your typical sort of I don't like the word alpha male, but, just feeling strong and confident and well, the testosterone is much more likely to be higher and be responding to that. But a man who can express himself, that's important.
So do you think that let's say a guy who is feeling emasculated in his life, whether that be from his partner or his mother or his boss or whoever, can actually increase his testosterone purely by just making an effort to be more assertive as a person?
Yeah. And in that, for those sorts of people, though, the energy within them is often very strong. This is probably that sort of subservient, submissiveness probably came in when they were a child or some sort of situation, or it could just be the way that they are wired to be that way. But this is where the homeopathics comes in, and it lights that up, and it sort of gets rid of some of those traumas that are in the way. And all of a sudden the confidence comes in, and it is so common. The men will tell me oh, I just quit my job. Actually, I hated that job, and I've actually just gone and got a job that I like. And it's the confidence to be right, I'm going to go, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to land on my feet. And I've had men quadruple their sperm counts in 4 months just by doing, they do the homeopathics, but at the same time,
they chop wood.
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of them get into outdoor roles because men often love to be physical. They're I actually don't like sitting at a desk. I want to be out using my hands. And, it's you can absolutely, by changing that, relationships are a massive source of either your health or your disease, getting into a disease state. If you've got relationships which are not strong, that can impact, the body massively.
It's all mental. That you just reminded me of a quote that I heard somewhere. They were talking about ADHD in children, especially boys. How with the schooling system, and they were talking. I think it was an Amish community, and they were talking about giving them medication because the boys can't sit still, and these Amish people were just I don't know what you're talking about. What we do is we take the boys fishing. We get outside and we let him go, and we let him be a boy. He doesn't have anything wrong with him. He's a boy. He needs to go and run around. So we do that, and he's more than fine. He grows up to be great. He grows up to be strong and to be a good leader and to be a healthy man. Which is it truly speaks to what you're talking about. It's letting biology manifest the way that it should.
And it's really interesting with the Amish too, because you look at their health statistics, they are far better.
Are they?
Yes, they are far, far better.
Doesn't surprise me.
They steer clear of a lot of the mainstream medical, mandatory things that other people, are involved in, but their rates of autism are so they're pretty much non-existent. And so why we should be looking at the areas of the world where they're really thriving and ask, what are they doing differently?
Yes. Absolutely. That just seems so obvious. Okay, what if we're really trying to fix the problem, well, let's look at the people who are doing it right. Let's look at the communities that are having success and understand that, right?
Because I think they're probably really connected as well, aren't they? I mean, it's
community-wise.
Exactly. It's multifaceted. And if you've seen the studies on, the blue zones where they sort of say this is where the oldest people live around the world, and they're sort of looking at what do they do. I think what they found is a common thread between all of these cultures, even though they all eat differently, they do different practices, but it's the community and the connection is what unites every single person. And so the Amish, they would do that, right? And but absolutely, we stomp out of little boys this energy. We want them to sit still and be obedient, and then we're surprised when they are adults who are like depressed and have no energy and they're fatigued. And it's like we didn't nurture that in the child.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Look how it's turned out as an adult. Surprise, surprise.
Mm.
Yeah. They are a fascinating society of people. I'm truly intrigued. I watched a little documentary recently about these YouTuber lads that went and spent. They were just intrigued about Amish people, so they went to an Amish community, just two guys, and they were videoing the whole thing, and they were just asking these Amish folks, "Hey, can we stay with you for a weekend, for a few nights?" And obviously these Amish, like a lot of them were like, "That's a bit weird, no." But then eventually they found a guy who was like, "Sure, man, yeah, come stay with us." And these two lads went and stayed with this family. With this, they had a son who was about their age, and they just lived they lived with them for. I think they stayed with them for a little while actually, because they did a bunch of work out on the land, and then they went and had the communal dinner, and it was so beautiful. I mean, once you get past the goofy beards and the outfits, the way that they live and their values, and it was really beautiful. And these two YouTuber guys were quite touched and quite moved by the experience. And so it's interesting just how emotionally they were all in a really good place, and physically, they all looked. There were no obese people. There was community, there was laughter, there was joy, and it was very, very intriguing.
On that note, right, even with obesity, so Dad was sending me podcast links. He's so funny, right? Because we obviously talk, general sort of health things, but a lot of the time he will start to send me podcast links. And I'm like, Dad, I've covered that like years ago. Like he's like, I've discovered this new amazing person. He's a neurosurgeon and he's all about like the red light. So say Dr. Jack Kruse, or Huberman covers it a little bit with the light science and, all of that. We were talking about getting the light for hormones. Yeah. But if you are eating your meals outside under direct sunlight, you metabolize them like so much better. So
really?
If you want to, reduce your weight, eating outside under direct sunlight is amazing. So the cultures who live closer to the equator, who get more sunlight, you can eat far more calories than those who are indoors a lot more often, under the blue light a lot more often. That really destroys hormone health. So it's all tied in, right? Because your metabolic health, your sexual, like hormone health, they are all linked. This is the thing in the human body. Nothing works in isolation. It is a community of cells looking out for the whole organism. Yeah. So, if you want to be fit, healthy, it's like observe the natural laws of what you need to thrive.
So Ted, this is something that I've always wondered about, and you will probably understand from the way that I am by now that my instinct feels like this is wrong. What do you think about when people have their appendix or their tonsils or their adenoids or any part of their body removed?
So a very common one. Well, what are you doing? When the tonsils swell up, it's this tissue, specifically designed tissue in the body that is to flare up in the presence of like an invader. It's like a smoke alarm in the body, right? The tonsils swell up, they catch the bad guys, and it starts to make immune like defenses in the body, like white blood cells. It's going to protect you. Now, what happens when you take the smoke alarm out of a house? Well, you can't hear the siren anymore, but you have not put out the fire. And when people do that, you are leaving your body then open to sort of the attack. Now, very common, what I see in my fertility cases, it's often unexplained infertility. The woman has chronic fatigue, history of Epstein-Barr virus, things like glandular fever. These sort of more chronic viral overload, they get their tonsils out early. Now, you sort of got to look at why was their body in that state in the first place, because they only take tonsils out usually if it's repeated issues or they're swelling to the point of danger. The problem with, again, modern medicine, they don't know how to recalibrate what's actually going on in the body, how to strengthen, that immune defense so that this isn't happening. The homeopath does. So, it's like a catch-22. If you get to that point where the tonsils are so swollen, you really have to get them out for the sake of breathing, like a child just can't breathe properly. well, okay, yeah, you're gonna save maybe that life, but they just didn't know, they don't know how to do any other way. And then ultimately, yeah, even cutting the gallbladder out, this is a massive surgery that millions and millions of people are getting done. And I do with my clients this way to flush out the gallstones, flush the liver. And it's, they literally pass these stones. And my sister and I, we were having dinner with my dad, and she's had gallstone issues. So her liver is very compromised. It has been for probably like 5 years or something, but it was so severe in her second pregnancy that they actually advised that she should terminate my nephew. They just said, your liver is like not, you can't grow a baby. And then she didn't. She's like, I'm just going to do this. And obviously very stressful for her. Gets through, has my nephew who's perfectly healthy, but then she's like, right, I'm going to commit to like healing these things. She did 1 week of like the cleanse that I recommend. 1 week. So she went to dad before, got all of her tests done, got her gallbladder scanned, could see the stones. All of her liver enzymes have been elevated for 5 years. 1 week on this cleanse. And then she goes back literally the week after. Everything is in perfect ranges after 1 week.
Oh my God.
And yeah, got the gallbladder scanned. And a lot of the stones come out and you like physically see them, like these green stones, they just flush out. Because you in the process of the cleanse, you dilate sort of the ducts, the bile ducts, and then you drink this liquid. So it's like olive oil and grapefruit juice, and it really quickly goes to flush out all this bile. So then the stones get knocked out with it, and people just pass them. And but for her levels to all be normalized, you look at, why are we cutting out people's gallbladders?
Yeah.
When we can do this. And again, it's another big suppressed, like, it's ridiculous. I've got fertility patients who are being recommended to cut out their gallbladder, and they're like, I don't know what to do, because that's sort of in the public system, and they're like, I can't afford to sort of like do a cleanse that, this is free and this, that. I'm like, my gosh, if you look at the statistics of like colorectal cancer, because the gallbladder, it's like backlogs all that bile. You need that for digestion. The body, like, it doesn't make mistakes. It's really intelligent. If you
so what is the specific purpose of the gallbladder?
So it's like a backup of bile. So when we're eating, then we want to be having enough bile to maintain a very specific pH in the gut. And people, when they just cut that organ out, you can't digest things as well as you used to be able to. You can't get the nutrients and the minerals without all of the bile. And therefore, like the cancers in the bowel, they're just, statistically increased if people have got their gallbladder out. And so many people message me and they're like, I hate reading about like all of this now because, I had to get mine out when I was 18 or in my 20s, and it's super common to get it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and one philosophy is, okay, there's a problem with the gallbladder, take it out. The other one is fix the problem.
Yeah.
because the thing is that I just can't believe for a second that the take it out option that ends there. It doesn't end there. It's in there for a reason. You can't just take it out and then everything be fine. It's got a purpose, right? Of course it does. So what is the cascade of events after that? Well, I mean, I don't know, but you do, and it seems as though they can be far worse than the issue originally.
And if we look at like the appendix, if it's about, we need to get back to the roots and treat people holistically their whole lives, not stack them with toxins and this unhealthy, like unnatural lifestyle, and then wonder why the appendix is about to burst. Because obviously if the appendix bursts and people get septic, it's like, that's why everyone gets their trigger happy to cut them out, because it could result in death, and it's very dangerous if you have it explode or rupture. But why are we letting people get so chronically sick and overladen? We just need to address it earlier. But when I am working with people and they're sort of at that point where they feel between a rock and a hard place, like it's like their health has gotten so bad, or the cancers are like so big, and or the endometriosis is obviously one I work with a lot. And it's that pathological overgrowth of that endometrial tissue, and it's awful.
Let's talk about that, because Laurel has endometriosis and it's been quite bad. She's struggled with it quite a bit, and then when she had surgery when she was younger, I think when she was 17, where they basically burn it. Well, let's just describe what endometriosis is for people who don't know.
Yeah, so it's sort of the tendency for the endometrial lining that should just, stay inside its own cavity. It can start to proliferate and grow in places where it shouldn't, and it can be extremely painful. We can have heavy, heavy periods, and oftentimes, I guess if you were to compare it to, a disease process like cancer, like this over-proliferation of things in places where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, right.
And when
it's like a spider web growth on your like it can go around the ovaries and all kinds of weird places.
Yeah, and I mean, some people don't even know they've got it. There's been a big rise in what we call silent endo, where people don't even have symptoms, and yet when they go in for the investigative surgery, it's sort of like splattered everywhere.
Wow.
And the problem with endo is that if we just cut it out and we don't address the reason that it grew in the first place, well, more often than not, it will grow back.
Well, it's taking a leaf off a plant. It's going to grow. It's going to keep growing
back. Whereas this is where homeopathy comes in, and we want to say we need to recalibrate this vital force so that it stops doing what it's doing. We want to change the blueprint there, that energetic blueprint that has the body in overdrive. We need to rein that in and let it, self-heal, because the body is brilliant at self-healing if it's given the right stimulus. And let's say for a lot of the women, they are just born, they inherit this energetic blueprint, and the body's just off on its way. It's not a fault of whatever the person's done. They can live very healthy, but the energetics that we inherit are pretty strong. I always say this in almost anything when someone asks me, that old saying, and everyone says, your genetics load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
They don't really take into account just how full on your genetic or your energetic inheritance can be. Let's say in Laurel's case, where she's got endo and she's so young, if you were to look at her diet and her lifestyle, it's like she could have been perfect, like a lot of my patients, living like pretty reasonably perfect lives, didn't do anything wrong. But that energetic
still manifests.
That wiring was so strong that's how it ends up. So this is where you'd be looking at, is it in the family? And you'd look at all of the other aspects of the person to use a remedy. So when we're talking about surgery, I would often, if it's like stage 4, it's really bad, I would say, look, our best bet here is to remove it, get it all removed, but let's work on making sure it never comes back.
Yeah. So, okay. So then you're getting best of both worlds, right? You are clearing the symptoms which are causing discomfort, and then you're also trying to address the root cause from it from a different angle as well. That makes sense. So tell me, have you had much, and have you seen much success with treating and reversing endometriosis?
Certainly. And it depends on, how pathological it is. So the less pathological, the better, absolutely. Or if they've just got it removed. But you would absolutely, yes, treat the person in their totality, and painful, heavy, clotted periods all the time. And it's quite like with homeopathy, it's amazing how quick it can work on women's menstrual cycles. Like we use homeopathic estrogen, and, in terms of getting people pregnant, if they've been on the pill, oftentimes they've sort of suppressed the reproductive system completely, right? You just completely shut that off. You trick the body into thinking it's pregnant. And when you go off, a lot of women's hormones, that's a big cause of infertility these days, is that the hormones can't get going again, not in the direct perfect balance that they would have been if we hadn't shut it down.
Suppressed them in the first place.
But we can kickstart that process again with homeopathy, and it's almost like it's immediate. People just message me and they're like, what the heck? Because the menstrual cycles change. So as women, we're very lucky when we use homeopathy because it's pretty obvious that it's working, like pretty quickly.
Wow.
And yeah, it just depends.
How encouraging to get that feedback quickly, you know? Like I know everybody, I get it. People want the quick fix. And if you've got a headache and you take some Nurofen and the headache goes away in 15 minutes, great. I get it. That and I do that, you know, because sometimes you need to get on with your life. But the deeper, it sounds as though the deeper levels of healing, they just don't happen that fast. But if you can get results in a couple of weeks from something that has been quite debilitating, that's beautiful. How encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about, you have to find the right remedy. That's where if it takes a homeopath longer, it'll be because they have to figure out what distortion in your energy has allowed this endo to grow. So you're really digging into all of the personal details about someone, like, and with homeopathy, people would be so surprised, the bizarre little things that we want to know about, like your health history. But ultimately, we're trying to understand, why is your body not functioning, you know, correctly? And
getting to the root cause.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So
so that birth control is an interesting topic. It seems as though, from what you're saying, and even from my personal experience with you know, past girlfriends and even Laurel, when she had a short stint where she was on it, and it really messed her up. And I think that she was lucky. We were lucky in that regard, because early on in our relationship, when she went on it for a brief time, it fucked her up pretty quickly emotionally. She was in a bad place. You know, and she was all over the shop, and she was miserable, and it was awful. It was awful for her, and it was awful for me to see her like that. And it was blatantly obvious what was doing it. So in that regard, it was kind of a blessing, because we were like, yeah, you got it. This is not good. And then since then, I've learned about, you know, how it can really be terrible for women. But I'm sure there are a lot of women out there who it's not quite that bad. Yeah. So it's not bad enough for them to go, I need to get off this, but it's still causing problems in their emotional, hormonal, physical health. What are your thoughts on birth control?
Oof, it's an insidious one. And yeah, I was probably more one of the people where the effects weren't really that obvious to me. Except I do know when I went off, all of a sudden I realized, I was like, wow, the world just looks a bit brighter. Like music sounds better. It was the most slight change for me, but it was noticeable. It's like I was waking up sort of with a smile on my face, and I was like, this is a bit funny. But I had not noticed that before, and it was funny, the more patients that I worked with who said those sort of exact words to me, I was like, well, that's definitely a thing there. But if you look at the statistics, I think it was through Switzerland who did it predominantly, but they looked at the number of women who started the pill, and they wanted to know 2 years later what statistic of those women had gone to fill scripts for anxiety or antidepressant medications. And it was a massive statistical increase.
Wow.
So when you're playing with hormones, you know, with Laurel, she had an exaggerated version where it was obvious what was doing it. Some women, let's say they're taking the pill for like a year and it's not so obvious to them, but they're like, I just don't feel well. They go to the doctor, they get a script for it. It's like, let's just, you know, but the hormones really, they matter. I was actually, even outside of mental health and, you know, even your physical health, women with our pheromones, with our hormones, we are attracted to different men when we are on the oral contraceptive pill and we shut off our natural hormone production versus when we are off it. So women, you know, when we're looking at the divorce rate these days, for the number of women who met their partners when they were on the pill, what you are actually attracted to, like physically, but also mentally and emotionally, it completely changes for many people when they go off the pill.
Because of the hormone profile.
The hormone profiles. And the smell of men's sweat, that, you know, women, they've done all of these studies on that. So women tend to find their husband's sweat the most sort of like attractive, like that they will be able to pick it out of 10 dirty shirts. They can often pick, I like that one the most, and that will often be their husband. But yeah, so
when they're on the pill, it's different. They have different taste.
Yes, exactly. And so let's say when a woman's going like ready to ovulate, release an egg and wants to get pregnant, when she's on the pill, they're just flatlined, right? There's no spike. There's no like desire to go out and get pregnant. That biological urge is dampened down.
Yeah.
But in regards to what you're attracted to, more often, if you are ovulating and you're not on the pill and your hormones are really well balanced, you're feeling good, you would be more attractive to a manly man, the more like higher testosterone. It's sort of like you can smell them out. And it's like, it's this mating thing of like, you would be a good match for me. Like biologically, we would make good, strong babies. Whereas, and you know, when we kiss, like we exchange all of this immunological information about would we make good offspring, should we have babies? But if you're on the pill, you lose that sixth sense completely. You smell different to men. You're not as alluring. Like as a woman, when you release that estrogen, when you're about to release an egg, your voice changes, your smell changes. It's crazy. This is all biology that we are made because they wanted the human race to continue and succeed. So
sending so many signals that we don't consciously know are being sent and communicating in ways that we aren't even aware that we're communicating with each other, but it's happening.
It's unreal. You look at a mother who's breastfeeding and the way that the saliva from the baby on her nipple can tell her body what the baby needs to grow, and it completely, breast milk changes throughout every month, every day for what the baby needs. If the baby's about to go through a growth spurt and they need more fat, or if there's like a virus going around and in the saliva, it lets mum know through the nipple. It's like, that's how smart we are. And like
that's incredible.
Said, doctors have reduced us to sort of, we're machines. We are not machines. We are divinely intelligent. And the more that we honor that and respect our bodies and what they're trying to do and just stop suppressing it on like every chance we get.
Yeah. That it really is magical, isn't it? We just, and I talked about this before, we have this arrogance about pretending as though we understand exactly how all the pieces work and we've got it all figured out, and all you got to do is, you know, take this thing or get rid of that thing. But it seems like we just have no idea, and we need to be able to go, let the magical thing take care of itself, create an environment where it can do the work that we aren't able to understand. You know, all that kind of holistic symbiosis of us being a human, an animal that is one with the earth and with whatever the hell's going on around us, and letting it exist the way it should. It's I mean, it's all hippie talk, isn't it?
It is. And on that, it's like when you look at the human being, we are the most incredibly advanced soft technology. And I sort of think part of the agenda in hiding how brilliant and how intelligent the human body is, you know, people are attracted to that transhumanist, like immortal machine, you know, where they're saying you can, you know, I'm not sure if you've seen the actual technological things they are talking about, and even uploading our consciousness. I mean, this is far-fetched for anybody who has not researched what they are actually propositioning,
working
to go
on
towards. Like, they're talking about like immortalized sort of organs where we can upload our brain waves, you know, to sort of like an off server where when the human body dies, we don't have to die with it. And it's just, with all of their suggestions for the technology that they want to bring in, it's pretty clear that they are trying to sort of recreate, like, we are the original technology, human beings are. And our senses, even when you look at, I mean, they've jammed up a lot of our senses, but if you go back to the indigenous wisdom, even in terms of like the telepathic nature of a lot of our Aboriginal, like they've sort of done studies and they're saying, how were they so advanced? How were they able to cross from here to here and make a trek? They're saying no one would survive that. And they're saying you've got almost like a compass, in like these senses. It's like these super senses, even the intuitive sort of hits, the telepathic nature, that these days we don't, like, most people don't believe in that. They're not in touch with that at all. It's hard to believe it ever existed.
We're numb to it.
And yet the actual leading edge science, if you were actually in the journals, if you were actually looking at, all the quantum physicists who have anything good to say, like, they're all saying it, it's this next level. And so human consciousness is sort of, that's going to be the next like 10 years, but human consciousness is completely under attack right now. And they want to keep it in a box. They do not want people exploring it. The thing is, your body is a really integral part of being able to explore like human consciousness. If you're in a very sick body and you're stuck, your senses can be blocked off. Like your spirit can really be sort of in chains, and so
everything's muted, isn't it? You just can't. You just can't feel as much.
Yeah.
And you're talking about that concept of being able to upload your consciousness into a robot that is you, but you have this super mechanical body. Have you heard this account of people who have had a heart transplant? And there was and then he had a heart transplant. This guy had a heart transplant, and then he got healthy. It worked, but his whole demeanor changed. He became had a completely different attitude. And a friend and I actually wrote a script about like a short film about this guy who it was a comedy, because instead of a heart transplant, it was a fecal matter transplant, and he ended up getting the poop from a serial killer and became a serial killer.
Yeah.
But there's truth in the joke, the heart transplant thing, where this guy changed. Like his family observed that he had a complete demeanor change because of just this one physical organ. But so how does that work? If we're going to upload our consciousness out of our body and think that it's just going to work normally, as if that it's a separate thing again, this concept of being separate, I'm so obsessed with it.
With the heart is much more than just a pump. Like if you look in mainstream medicine, they're just going to look at the heart as a pump.
Yeah.
Heart has, you've probably seen it, but over 40,000 neurons. These are the brain cells, memory, and the electromagnetism of the body. It pumps out from the heart. So you can measure the energy of a human being from meters away. Our I guess, what are you going to call it? Our aura, our sphere, it blasts out like meters upon meters. There was a little girl.
Centers in the heart.
Centers in the heart.
Wow.
So if you've got a broken heart, and this is, again, if you're going through trauma, your heart broken, for whatever reason, your heart is downtrodden. This is sort of the essence of the energy of life. It's not really the brain. And if you want to create in this world, if we're going to talk about the power of consciousness in regards to creating, like manifestation, all of that, the key is absolutely the heart. So Joe Dispenza would be one person most people are aware of.
Yeah.
But syncing up your heart coherence with the brain coherence and doing it as like a unified being. That's where we tend to feel more, is like the heart-centered. So the brain, you can think, but, you've got a brain in your heart. And there was a little girl, and she actually got a heart transplant, and she started having these really night terrors and nightmares. And she was detailing to her mum this same nightmare. It was like recurring. And then the mum's like, this is really weird. Took her to a psychologist, and the psychologist is like, this is sounding not so much like a nightmare as like a memory, because it's the exact same thing. Yeah. Every time. And they ended up, going through sort of the authorities to find out who the little girl was who donated the heart to this little girl. And she had been murdered by this man. And the little girl was dreaming, and she was explaining to the psychologist, she's running, he catches her. This is exactly what he said to me. This is the tattoo on his arm. And they went to the man and they said to him the comments that this little girl had said. And he was like really taken aback, and he's in jail, but he's like, where did you hear that? And they're saying this little girl who got the heart remembers what the last words were that he said to her. And so, yeah, the brain, the heart absolutely has a memory.
Oh, that's
Creepy.
That's a chilling story.
Yeah.
That's wow. Yeah. It's just a pump though. It's just a pump. It's all it does.
Yeah.
It's just a muscle and it just pumps blood. That's all we need to worry about.
With every aspect. It's like I could talk about like every aspect of the human body and the intelligence. Even, you know, when we're talking about the light outside, the red light and the retina and the eyes, it's like we are just these perceiving like vibrational beings. And so to reduce us to, you know, just the matter is so it's uninformed.
Yeah. It is. It is. It makes me think about. I'm thinking about the immune system and the immune system function, and how that functions in reality. Can you school me on your understanding of how that works? Like what happens when we get sick? What happens when we're healthy? Like how does the immune system fight off illnesses? What's the process?
It's very interesting because the old school sort of virology, in terms of, you know, like viruses are the bad guys and they're attacking, or bacteria are the bad guys and they're attacking, it's slowly but surely being disproven in terms of it's not what we thought it was. So some elements that are coming up more is looking at the body in terms of like even, let's say, the parasites or the candida and the things that, you know, a lot of people are struggling with and saying like, oh, my body's like overridden with these things, is when you actually look at why the candida is there, why are the parasites there, why are we getting these bacterial, let's say the strep infections, you know, strep throat or tonsillitis. What is it that's actually going on there? And it's more and more looking like the parasites feed on heavy metals and sort of that toxic debris. And even with the bacteria are brought in as the body's cleanup crew to try and address the toxicity that's actually in there. So while we are looking at, oh, it's the strep is the bad guy, it's actually not. It's what's behind the strep and what is the reason that the strep is able to proliferate. So you've got
wow. There's a step that we're behind, that we're missing.
And it's even as far as, let's say, for example, you've got water in a home and it's damaging, it's causing water damage, and you've got mold. Now, everyone looks at the mold like the mold is the problem, right? Like the mold is the thing there that's like so wrong and causing all the toxicity. But when you look at, but why is the mold even prospering? It's these very toxic building like agents, you know.
Yeah.
It's the chemicals. The mold is actually trying to sort of remediate the situation. That's nature's way of trying to heal things. So I saw an example the other day, and it's like, if you've got a wound and you were to put your foot on the ground and let some maggots come in, the maggots are going to come in and clear up all the debris, the dead and dying tissue. And they are not going to touch the healthy human tissue. They only clean up the debris. And no one looks at the maggots like they are the problem here. We know it was the wound, it's the dead tissue. And bacteria are the same. And human beings, we are largely made up of parasites and bacteria, right? Like cell for cell, it's an overwhelming amount of bacteria. It's creepy.
It's riddled with
we're
them,
more
aren't we?
bacteria than we are not.
Wow.
And so we shouldn't be looking at the bacteria necessarily as what's behind that and why is it being able to proliferate. And then just to tie it back to something I've seen a lot is that with a lot of the kids, let's use like strep throat as an example. When you look in homeopathy at the profile of the strep, the vibration of strep and the symptoms that you see with strep, you also see a lot of it with this other remedy called Ignatia, which is for grief and shock and like homesickness and sadness, like all of these things. The strep and the ignatia on paper, when you look in our textbooks, the symptoms are very similar. And I find it so interesting because I put out on my Instagram something I'd seen about it, and the parents are like, oh my gosh. And it's like, since they'd moved houses and they're like, the child's really homesick, they're missing their old school, they're really like heartbroken, they're manifesting with strep throat after strep throat after strep throat. And it was just a flood of messages. And then what was so interesting with a lot of these recurrent strep throat things, the kids can start to have some like neurological things where, speaking is difficult. They can start to get really anxious and shut down and all of that. So when the parents started treating them for the strep throat homeopathically, they're like, you are not going to believe what my child has just like come. And they've come and said to me for the first time, Mummy, I'm so sad. And the child that young is just able to verbalize what the body was doing with that sadness. And so, when I'm looking at patients, whether it's like recurrent tonsillitis, and I'm trying to figure out like what's going on there now, it could be an inherited issue. And this is where it might not be to do with the child themselves, but what they've inherited down family lines. But it is fascinating to see what comes out when we actually trigger that healing response. So when we're looking at the immune system, again, I'm going to go back to, it's not the Epstein-Barr virus that is causing the chronic fatigue that so many people are dealing with. It's not the virus. It's all that led up to. The virus is just sort of it's a sidestep of the actual issue. It's not the cause. It's like a byproduct in there. So
is that why there are always some people who just can be around sick people without getting sick?
Yep, the robust. Yep.
Yeah, right.
And you can have men, and it's most of the women who are like affected by mold severely, they are often more likely the highly strung, super healthy, trying to do everything right, perfectionist, like tick, 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 overwhelmed, type A. And they're like, why is my husband this like robust, eating junk food, doesn't care? He's just not affected. And it's like largely that mental and emotional aspect. He just doesn't care. He's like not even. So there's degrees to it because it does meet somewhere in the middle. Sometimes like, you can be completely ignorant and relaxed and get totally messed up by a toxic overload. So definitely not denying the toxicity of mold, but usually it's an energetic susceptibility that has allowed it to cause such an issue.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So it's still poison. Mold is still, there's still a problem with it, but it's the
susceptibility.
Yeah, of the individual depends greatly on how they are going to be affected.
Yeah. And we've all got a toxin bucket where, it just might get to that point of like full, and then that's when it tips over. So people think it's like just the mold, but it's like, it was all these other things that you've done. It's just accumulated, then boom.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. It sounds like to me, and tell me if this is true, that the homeopathic route is a more challenging one to healing, because it sounds as though you are going to be faced with a bunch of junk that has to come up and out in order to get out the other side, rather than take a pill, feel better, but not fix the problem.
Yeah. It's definitely, you can have a healing crisis, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I've heard of this,
detoxing, but people sort of, when you educate them about it, a lot of people who come through my doors anyway, I guess that's the thing though, right? They're coming to me because they're in for it. They want to heal.
Yep.
I think
it's going to be better than remaining sick. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if you went to a doctor and they prescribed homeopathy and you weren't expecting it and you wanted the quick fix, you'd feel pretty ripped off. It's like, what?
Yeah, I feel worse. Why do I feel worse? I came to you to feel better.
Yeah. So for me, when I took my first homeopathic remedy, at this point, I didn't completely know about, I definitely didn't know about it, but I didn't necessarily believe in it. I was sort of like, what on earth is this thing? So I was like studying to be a naturopath, my sister in and out of hospital, just incurable. They said to her she needs to be on antibiotics every day for the rest of her life. That was their only treatment option. So this lecturer that I had, he used to say to me, you'd be a good homeopath, you'd love it. And I always fobbed him off because I'm like, if that was any good, I would know all about it. I'm at a college of natural medicine and I've never heard of it, so it's obviously trash. But I was desperate, and he said it to me one day when she was in hospital, and I was like, right, if you can cure her chronic condition, I will switch my degree next week. So he met with her, long story short, cured her issue just with drops under the tongue. And I'm thinking, what the heck has just happened? I mean, she used to get IV antibiotics in hospital for a week. She's on an oxygen mask. Like, it was no petty little thing. It was like a full-on thing. And it was emotionally rooted. This is the thing. The homeopathics addressed the emotional roots of what she was going through, and she had to turf all of that out, and the symptoms cleared. But before I changed my degree, I was like, okay, just in case that was just a random coincidence, I better come see you myself. And so he gave me sulfur, which has a big affinity for like detoxing the liver, the skin, and all of this. But that night, I took the remedy at uni, threw it in my bag, completely forgot about it. I have a splitting headache like an hour later, and I never get headaches. So I'm just thinking, what the heck? Like, I'm just like, do I need to drink more water? What?
Yeah.
And I go home. I have this most hilarious like interaction with my family where I end up in tears, and I'm not like overly emotional person. My mum's like, what is going on? And then I just
something
go down.
Stirred.
Something has stirred within me, and I've completely forgotten all about the homeopathics. And so I'm downstairs and I'm sobbing, and I'm saying to my mum, oh, when you and Dad got divorced, I'm talking about something from 20 years ago. And she's like, she's like, have you had a bad day? Like, what is happening?
Your poor mum.
And I know. And then she just apologizes to me about these things that I'm bringing up. And then she gives me a hug, and she's like, well, do you want to come finish your dinner? And I'm like, yeah. So, and I completely just, right, that's just over. Put that in the back of my mind. The next morning I wake up and I've got cold sores all over my lips, like 7 cold sores, like never had that in my life. I'd had cold sores, but never 7. It was ridiculous.
Right.
I started to have this head cold coming on, and I'm like, what the hell? But I was really robust. When I did this appointment with this guy, I said to him, I'm like, I'm pretty healthy. I've got no chronic health conditions. I'm really robust. I don't know what you're really going to treat, but let's just have fun. And, so then I go to uni, even though I'm like getting a bit sick, and like halfway through the class, I'm like, I can hardly see the board. My eyes are watering. I've got like fully blocked up head cold. I was like, I'm going to have to bloody go home.
Was this after you'd taken more of the stuff?
I took 1 dose and threw it in my bag and forgot about it. 1 dose of sulfur.
Wow.
And I'm like walking down the stairwell, and I bump into this homeopath who I had seen, and he works at the university, and I just happened to see him in the stairwell. And he's like, hey, going? I was like, actually, I'm really sick. I'm going home.
I'm fucked, if you want to know.
Look at that. And he's like, oh, good. The sulfur's working. And I was like, the sulfur? I was like, you think this has something to do with the homeopathics? He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh. And, then you're looking at it, it's like it's triggered my liver. The headache is my body is immediately trying to detox. The cold sores have come out. My vital force, the energy that flows through my body has been completely like lit up, like fully lit up. Yeah. And it turns this virus out onto the skin. The most peripheral safe organ wants to get the virus out of my body onto the skin. And then for me, I used to get a cold sore at least every couple of months. I never had a cold sore since then. I was in my early 20s. I used to get them all the time. So you look at what the homeopathics did to my body in that it was massively strengthening, dumping as much toxicity as it could quickly. And then I was really fascinated because my next period, like I hadn't told this homeopath anything about my menstrual cycles because I was like, they're perfect. There's nothing for me to tell you. They're perfect. And then the next one was so different. And I was like, what is all this like bright red blood? I'm like, why is this so different? And I said to him, and it's like, I had completely forgotten how healthy periods should look because I'd spent 2 years on the oral contraceptive pill, went off it, and I didn't even realize that it was not like that perfectly fertile. But this is the thing. He gave me a remedy to address me in my totality, like my whole self.
Yes.
He didn't even know my periods were different. But when you light up the energy in somebody's body, the body knows
That was
what it
one
needs
of the
to
list
feel.
of things that needed help.
One. So it just
Yeah.
sends energy, vital energy. So your hormones get back really quickly. So the next period, and then since then, obviously they've remained perfect. But it's like, how many people out there don't even know, that their periods are like off, or like anything about their body? I was completely ignorant. I thought I'm so robust, I'm so healthy. Oh yeah, but I do get cold sores, and I have this bit of like autoimmune, this random skin thing that has come up once before. And yeah, that's the job of a homeopath, is to piece together all of the little symptoms, all of the little things about you, all about your family history, all about the traumas that you've been through, because they're all unique and we all respond differently. And from that, you go through these massive textbooks and you're trying to find that vibration that we have taken from nature, which suits that specific distortion of energy. That's how you get rid of symptoms. Wow. That is real healing. You have to try it, by the way.
So listen, I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you about, me personally, in depth after the call. There's a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about now. But firstly, just talking about vibration, have you ever heard of this guy named, I'm going to get his name wrong, I think it was Raymond Rife or something. His name was Rife.
Yeah, Rife
it
machines.
was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you know about this thing he'd created, and look, I don't know if this is true. I've just heard the story, and so I'll tell it now. He created a machine that created frequencies that were the like inverse frequency of illnesses. It kind of played that frequency through your body. I don't know if it was a headphone thing or if it was a full body thing, but apparently he was able to cure and kill all kinds of different diseases by just finding the right frequency. And of course, it got destroyed and he was killed. He's gone. We don't know anything about it. It's all gone.
Yeah.
It's all disappeared. Yeah. But there's all this, and maybe it's not true. Maybe it's all some whimsical bullshit story. But if it is true, it's fascinating.
Well, you can look at a lot of the machines, like similar frequency devices that are available now, and you've got medical doctors using them. So they will do a thermo body scan, or they'll take bloods, and then they will expose people, to these machines, the frequencies that harmonize. And generally, you're pumping sort of nature's energetics into people. That's sort of where they get the programs to run for these machines. They come from nature, the natural harmonics. And the results afterwards, it's obvious what's happened. So the inflammation markers are down, white blood cells, all of that down. And so these machines do work, and it's all frequency at the core. And this is the thing, when we really realize what the human being is. We are not these hard matter things
meat
that
suits.
We perceive. Yeah, that's not us. At the core of it, consciousness is informing itself. Even Einstein was like famously quoting all of these things, and it's like, it's energy that precedes matter. Energy is what ends up making the physical thing. So in quantum physics, of course, they're saying like energy and like the mind and those connections, you can make quantum leaps in terms of what you create. But in the human body, if we are looking at energy of the human body precedes the formation of matter. Look at a growing baby, the sperm, the egg, blast of light. The energy precedes the formation of everything that grows forth. And as adults, we're no different. The energy precedes it. So you start filling yourself with negative energy, whether it's, hardcore, if you're going to move next to a big like Wi-Fi, like 5G tower, that energy is going to have an effect on your human body. It can distort those fields. Cancer rates are very high for people who live in that sort of zone. But also negative mental and emotional energy, like trauma causes very specific disease patterns. So it's energy first. So if you want to heal, you must look at the energy behind what's been created.
It's interesting you bring up trauma, because I think that is a place that I can completely understand why a lot of people don't want to go there because it's sometimes it's too dark, it's too heavy, and it's, you know, I'm a firm believer in the only way out of pain is through pain, but that can be sometimes too much. You know, that can, depending on the level of trauma, that can break someone, or it can be just feel like it's too much to bear. So I completely understand that, but it also makes a lot of sense to hear you say that is if you are driven to get to the other side, that is where you start with the trauma and with the emotional, energetic issues.
And it's really interesting homeopathically, because I've worked with people who, I mean, you can't even fathom the level of trauma and abuse, and just, it's like something that I've been hardened to, I guess, over the years, where it's just like I just cannot believe
Horrific.
that human beings, you know, that have been subjected to such things. And what's so interesting is that some of these people, it's when they take the homeopathic medicine that they need, the feelings do come up and they do need to go through it, but it's almost like an echo of the old trauma, and the strength within them, that vital force, has become so much stronger that they navigate it and they actually get through it. I think what a lot of people are hesitant to do is just talk about the same traumatizing event over and over again. Some of them have sat in talk therapy with psychiatrists or psychologists or whoever it is for 20 years, and they have detailed the same horrors over and over again, and they don't want to do it. And yet when they come to me, it's very interesting. I usually start with, like, you know, why have you come here today? And they'll start with the physical things, and that will give me a really good indication. But when they give me certain symptoms, I can almost guess what horrors their body has been through as a result of the physical pathology that they're reporting. And let's say in the sexual abuse sphere, I find it so fascinating because I will let people tell me their case for 90 minutes. I will be detailing everything, and the whole time I'm waiting for them to tell me what I expect has happened. And when they don't, I will often just ask at the very end, I'll say, look, with everything that you're telling me, I would expect that there is a trauma of this nature. Can you tell me, like, has that, and it's always a yes. Every time I have asked, it is a yes.
I bet that really trips people out too, to know that you already know something that it's like, but I didn't tell you that.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Intuitively, I think a lot of them know that it has impacted, like they're sort of sitting on it, knowing like, oh gosh, is this what has caused this pathology? Most of them, you know, obviously they start to cry, but they did know that there was an element of that tying it in. They just didn't think it would be significant to tell me.
Well, also this is opposite to what we are taught. We are not taught that these things will manifest into our physical health.
Yeah.
We're taught the opposite of that. So for people to have that instinct to feel like, I feel like this is what's gotten, this is part of the problem, but everything I'm being told is not. And then someone like you can say, no, that actually is not only part of the problem, probably the root cause of the problem.
Yeah. I contemplated writing to the urologist at like a major Brisbane hospital, because 2 of their patients within the same week had came into our clinic, and it was, just history of sexual abuse, severe sexual abuse. And the hospital, after 7 rounds of antibiotics, said, there's actually nothing we can do. You know, everything had seized up internally, and the girls are left in extreme pain, and there's just like literally nothing, you know, that medicine can offer. And I just thought, I'm like, I need to write to these people so they even think to ask, is there any history of sexual abuse? Because it is a quick and easy fix if people realize how to actually transmute that vibration, that trauma out of the body. You imagine how scared like a body is when it's being violated. It's going to seize up and it starts to like have dysfunction. And the homeopath can recalibrate. Any homeopath would have recognized this pattern if they had seen these girls. It's not like I am but it is such an obvious presentation. It is an easy fix. And these girls, they didn't need to do 7 rounds of antibiotics. And, when they walked into the clinic, one of them, she was like a model. She was just stunningly beautiful. She comes in, she's just crying, and she's scared that she's going to be stuck like this forever. Because, if the people, that we're meant to trust at the very top of this say there's nothing to be done, we're going to let you go from hospital now. Where are they meant to go? It was lucky that this person's sister heard me blah, blah, blahing on Instagram and is like, can you just go and see this girl and see if there's anything? And yeah, that girl was like one of these cases where she didn't tell me during the consult what had happened. And when I pressed further and said, is there any history of this? And she said, well, actually, yeah. And then detailed it. So it's, the body keeps the score. And especially when things are frightening and very traumatic. And the thing is, oftentimes this goes up family lines. There's things that people aren't aware of that are impacting their body. So as a homeopath, you were always going to look at what was happening. Is there any suicide in your family? Is there any bipolar, any schizophrenia? And random questions, the homeopath wants to know, are you left-handed? Are there twins in your family? These sorts of things are significant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating, Mel. I had an experience one time where on mushrooms, where I felt as though, and the short version is, I felt as though I'd merged consciousness with my father, and I was so sick. I was purging his pain. It was not specific. I don't know what it was in relation to, but I was vomiting. I had diarrhea, and I was in absolute emotional agony, and I was moaning. It was horrible. One of the worst experiences of my life, and it wasn't mine. It was my old man's pain. And interestingly, that process took a while for me to recover from. I was a mess not a mess, but I was out of it for a good few months. And I told Dad about this story. I told him the whole story a couple of years later, and he listened. And then when I'd finished the story, he goes, And I said, why do you say that? Well, and he goes, well, when was this? And I said, it was about 2 years ago at the time. And he goes, maybe that's why about 2 years ago I started feeling a lot better about my life. And this was a very interesting moment, because my dad's not this kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And it was a really interesting response from him, and it actually gave me a bit of closure on that experience, because I wasn't sure why I'd had that experience. I was being responsible when I was taking the psychedelics. I wasn't trying to party. I was trying to go inward and learn about myself, and that was really fascinating to me. So that I tell you that anecdote because that cements for me exactly what you were talking about that stuff that is passed down ancestrally. I've experienced that. I've felt that. I don't know what it was in relation to. I don't know what it was about. And maybe Dad doesn't even know what it was about. But it affected me. And the fact that it energetically affected him.
Well, this is it, where they say if you heal yourself, you can even heal the ancestors, not only say your daughter, but going up. And this is when you look in quantum physics, it's like we can exist outside of, space-time, and that healing has a ripple effect throughout the whole universe. It's not just here on this plane right now. So it's all so fascinating. This is where too, when a mother heals herself, if she's got a daughter or a father, but mothers are very linked energetically to their child, especially in that first 7 years, because they're sort of saying, the spirit's still incarnating. Children are little angels. They're just here full of wonder, very much that connection, like a godly connection. But if a mother heals herself of something in that time, you can often see massive changes and shifts within the child at the same time, and vice versa. This is why often if I'm working with a child, you'll often work with the mother too, because they're so linked. And one's healing can impact and also be blocked by the other. So you sort of want to do both at once. But have you seen those studies on mice with like the cherry blossom scent?
No, talk to me.
So they did, and these are sort of like more mainstream experiments, but what they did was they exposed this set of mice to the scent of a cherry blossom, and then they would electroshock them, let them smell the scent, electroshock them. So really traumatized.
Creating an association.
These poor mice, yeah. So after not too long, of course, they smell the cherry blossom and then they go into a frantic, like anxious mess. They're traumatized, they're petrified. And then the offspring of those mice, the scientists followed them and they would let them smell the cherry blossom. And even though these younger mice had never been electroshocked, they went frantic in an absolute spin. And this happened down like 3 generations that they did it. The offspring of that offspring, frantic. And so when you look at human beings, you know, it is no wonder, you know, that what the parents and grandparents have been through, whether they went to war. I worked with a lot of women from the Middle East, and amazing is my job because it's just so international. It's so easy just to connect online. But they're in the Middle East, a lot of them also from Lebanon, and these women had almost like these panic disorders and severe gastrointestinal symptoms like vomiting phobias, but also like IBS, like really intense, like don't want to leave the house sort of style, really full on. And when I'm looking through at their life, there was nothing distinct, like nothing terrorizing about their life. So I'm like, okay, if I can see that this panic disorder did not originate with you, I need to go up your family tree. So tell me about mum's life. Well, when mum was pregnant with me, or even sometimes it's before that, before they're pregnant, she's in a bunker during the war, bombs are being dropped above. So in that moment, mum's energy gets completely distorted, massive fear of death, anxiety. Then they can develop like this health anxiety, which is what their children were experiencing. But when you understand like energy and distortions in energy in the field and how that can be passed on, it's no wonder, you know, that these mental and emotional traumas often come down, and they might look a little bit different, but often at the core of it, that's it. I've got another patient and she's chronically constipated. She's an Aussie, but she's like just from day dot, like from a baby. Never have been able to go to the toilet on my own. And she said, my mum is the same and my grandmother is the same. Now, when I'm looking at that, it's like, okay, then I know that it starts with the grandmother. So that's where the cure is going to be. I need to look in grandma's life. What's going on in grandma's life? So the patient starts digging. She's like, well, my grandfather had been married before. He actually had murdered his first wife and gone to jail for it.
Oh my God.
But once he got out, he remarried. And this, you know, the grandma, you can imagine the fear, you know, that you would feel. Now, when you're feeling fear, muscles constrict, you're bracing, you know, constipation, chronic constipation coming down that family line. And so, yeah, the remedies where I'm looking for are, you know, you're looking at like opium, homeopathic opium, which causes, you know, it's like an opioid, which causes chronic constipation, but also that slightly dissociated feeling of like, you know, what it's like when you're on opioids. This is the thing with homeopathy. We take the frequency of elements, you know, that in a crude dose would cause it. If you take opiates, you're going to get constipation, a dissociated, oftentimes like sort of fearful. And that's what we can use to cure. So it's when you have to go up family lines, you need to find where did this distortion actually originate, because most people, it didn't originate in their life. It's going up.
So the medicines that you are working with, what are they? Are they herbs? Are they minerals? What are you using?
Total mix. So you've got a lot of herbal ones, definitely coming from plants, and we make them in the pharmacy. So belladonna, arnica is a big one. Most people know homeopathic arnica. Then you've got like minerals, so things like sulfur. We've got a remedy made out of like salt, like natmur, table salt. And they all have these massive, like you look through the Materia Medica, pages upon pages upon pages of symptoms associated with, let's say, sulfur or natmur, table salt. So these common elements found in nature have a very distinct vibrational pattern. So you've got ones like that. Then you've got like tissue, so animal tissue. You've got like snake venoms cause very specific pathology. We've got, ones made from human tissue, so made from cancer, made from estrogen, a whole mix. Then you can also make them what we call isodes. So if you have ever been damaged by a specific drug, like let's say I took a drug when I was 17 called Roaccutane, which was like a skin one.
Yeah.
And it's very suppressive and
dries you out, right?
Dries you out. And for a lot of people, this causes gut issues. It didn't for me, but very common because your skin also extends like inside and down into your gut. So a lot of people ended up with like celiac disease because all of the mucus throughout your whole body gets dried up. So your skin is glowing, but alas, deeper suppressive chronic issues. And a lot of people had like joint, like arthritic type things. Anyway, systemic inflammation ensues from that. So you can use remedies in homeopathy made out of Roaccutane specifically, which detoxes that Roaccutane. Now, just before the wedding, it was so funny because I'd been making it up for a patient and I thought, oh man, I'm going to detox this myself because I took this when I was younger. Let me just see if it has any sort of effect. And I took it, it was about like 2 or 3 months out from the wedding. And I start to have these random spots of acne come up all these years later. And I was like, crap, like Control Z, stop right now.
Control Z.
Yeah, I'm like, no.
Go back. How do I didn't mean to.
Honestly. And I thought, oh my gosh, I should have realized that's what would happen. But after the wedding, I think like the day after the wedding, I got straight back into it. And again, more spots came up. But before the wedding, to like really clear my skin up, I had to do a water fast to get that acne, like, just sort of a bit of a Band-Aid there. But and this is it. And then after that, I kept taking the Roaccutane and it fully cleared up. But what's happening in that, my body is detoxing sort of the chemical and the suppressive assault of that drug, which, I mean, that drug is hardcore. It impacts the liver. So it makes sense as to why the homeopath originally prescribed me sulfur. Again, big affinity for the skin, the liver. But so you can detox specific drugs fantastically.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about allergies.
Mm-hmm.
I get allergies to seasonal allergies. It's not. I'm allergic to horses and cattle and like mice, even some dogs and cats. I get puffy eyes. I get really mucusy, itchy throat, sneezy. I also get this seasonally. I went and saw, I think it was an immunologist back in Sydney, and they did the prick test on my arm, on my forearm, where they pricked me with a bunch of different things and on both forearms. And if I could find the photo, I would show you. But it looked like I'd just been hacked up by mosquitoes. It was insane. Like all of them, basically. A lot of the grasses really messed me up.
Yep.
But there was so many of them. I was on fire. So I still get these experiences of where I just get this allergy attack, where I'm kind of out of action for the day. I get shocking brain fog, sneezing. Can't stop sneezing, so much mucus, really kind of messes me up, and it'll last for sometimes a whole day and really kind of takes me out of action. What's going on?
So have you had that since you were pretty much born? When was the onset of any of the symptoms?
I actually feel like it's gotten worse as I've been an adult, probably the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. I feel like I don't particularly remember getting that as a kid.
What about the eczema? When did that come on?
Sorry, the horses and cattle was when I was super little. Mm-hmm. That's always been the case. Like mice, horses, cattle, I've always had that. So my eyes would puff up so they would almost be shut. The eczema was when I was an infant up until about 6 months, and then my GP even said to my mum, he'll swap this for asthma at 6 months, and that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. The eczema went away, and then it became asthma, and the allergies to animals. And to be honest, you know what? It's probably been ever since I was tiny, I would say, because the asthma has been there as well. But but I feel like I've been able to observe it more in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the truth.
And then looking at siblings, anyone else with it, mum or dad?
No.
No one else has any sensitivities?
I don't think so. I don't think that my mum or dad have it. My sister has a bunch of health concerns, but allergies doesn't, like mine, she doesn't have those.
So if I was taking your case properly, I would be delving into tell me everything that's also going on with your sister, because that's going to paint me a picture. Because if you've had it since you were a little boy, we know it has nothing to do with what you've done throughout your life.
Sure.
But something that's really interesting that I find, and this is sort of where the personality profiling of the homeopath comes in, and when you've taken enough cases, you start to sort of see these common threads that come through. So you have what's called miasms in homeopathy, which are just these dominant sort of energy, like inheritance things. And under this one called the syphilitic miasm, you can also see it in the carcinogenic miasm, but there is a tendency towards, it's like the immune system it's misfiring majorly. This is where the kids can have asthma and end up in hospital. It's like it's severe sort of presentations of things, but it's the immune system is completely
overreactive, right?
Overreactive. And we want to know why. So oftentimes it's in the syphilitic miasm. Now, when you're going through then, it's fascinating with the syphilitic miasm because a lot of the patients are very creative. They're the creative sorts. So it's like they have this level of enlightenment, but you can also often see a flip side where, and it often for them is like the spiritual aspect of life, like the veil is very thin. So oftentimes they have like a big affinity for, just this spiritual nature of things. They're not here like your typical like material, like I just need to work, and like they question things, but they're often, you can see flips to also depression, as much as the light and the creative, they have this duality, right? And they're so creative and inspired, but they can also dip down, absolutely. And the health can even just be their big dip. But most famous, and they have this, it's notable about them, this talent and like a magnetic sort of like nature that would be more syphilitic. So a lot of your actors, a lot of your musicians have these tendencies, and this is why, and they also have a tendency towards things like addiction, not always, but and it's like just that extra searching, and they tend to feel things more than the average person, like a bit of an empathetic, like, pull. They're just more susceptible to that because, again, it's like their energetic boundaries are maybe not as fortified as your average man who literally just wakes up and all he cares about is, right, go to the office, come home, eat my dinner, just don't care. Anyways, long story short, given the nature of your profession, like as a homeopath, I would always take into account asking all these questions of, what makes you tick? Like, what's the hardest things you've ever been through? That sort of paints me a picture of you as a person, like your nature. I want to know, are your thermals hot? Like, are you more hot and sweaty than Laurel?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, do you crave anything? Do you crave alcohol or anything, sugar, stimulants, whatever. So you want to ask all of that and tie that in. But
so it's a full-on holistic observation. You're trying to gather as much information as you possibly can.
Yeah, because the remedy that truly cures your condition, right, like completely heals it, it's not likely to be one of the simple acute remedies. So we have remedies like in our first aid kit. So if you look up allium cepa, that homeopathic remedy is what the Queen says cured her hay fever and allergies. Well, yes, it is a brilliant remedy, but it's usually just, it'll make it a bit better, but it doesn't go deep enough to completely recalibrate things. Sure. The lazy homeopath is going to say, take some allium cepa or something surface
because it'll give you some relief.
It'll give you relief, yeah, until you get to the root of the whole thing. But I would be optimistic that you can, cure the whole thing.
Wow. So I'd love, why don't we do this? I would love to do this with you properly, and then we'll see how we go, and we'll come back and we'll do another one at some point, and we can talk about the results and how it's all gone down the track. there's something else that I thought I would mention to you. I get terrible motion sickness.
Okay.
And I always have.
Okay.
Like I flew to Sydney and back recently, and on the way to Sydney, it was a normal flight, like perfectly normal flight. I thought I was going to vomit.
Yeah.
God, I just get hammered. I cannot go on a roller coaster. I can't get a needle without almost passing out. Like it's plagued me my whole life, and it's getting worse as I'm getting older.
Yeah. What is it about the needles?
And here's the thing. It's also blood and injuries in real life. I love zombie movies, which is odd because in real life, if I see a little bit of blood or it just, I'm not scared or anything like that. I don't. My body reacts instantly. Like Laurel, this was years ago. She actually had her appendix out, and we were in the shower and she had a little Band-Aid over her belly, and there was a tiny spot of blood on the Band-Aid. And I looked down and I went, "Oh, babe, you there's a little bit of blood there." And she was like, "Oh." And then by the time she looked up, I was like,
sliding down the shower.
Yeah. I did really well during the birth of our daughter. Yeah. I was with her for so long, and then there was one point where they I obviously didn't look down the business end of things because I knew that would be a problem, and that's, I was there to help Laurel.
Yep.
But there was one point where they put the drip in, they missed the vein, and she just started getting fluid. Her arm ballooned up, and the nurses were starting to stress out. And I looked at it, and then I was like, "Oh shit, that's bad." And then Laurel looked at it, and she started to panic. And then I was like, "Oh, here it comes. Fuck." I was like, "Not now. I can't do this now. She needs me." And then I was like, "Nah, I'm gone." And I went, "Babe, I'm just going to sit down for a minute." And my legs just went, and I just fell to the floor. I didn't pass out, but I was sweating and so close to vomiting. Anyway, look, I think that's a vagus nerve reaction, I believe.
But all of that would be very significant, just in painting a picture of how does your body react and why. And that's the job for the homeopath, to figure out why and what you're going to use to fix it. But these are the unique little things that no one would really think are significant. You would never think that could ever have anything to do with the hay fever or the allergies or anything else. But see, it's so intriguing to hear you say this, because I 100% know that it is all connected, because that is a significant thing in my life. That's an issue that I have to deal with. The allergies are an issue that I have to live with. The asthma is an issue that I have to live with. These are significant issues that I get around, but would like to get rid of, very much so. I'm getting on top of the asthma with the changes in my breathing, which has in turn stopped me from getting sick as much. Having a little 2-year-old, she's bringing all kinds of bugs home, and I've been getting sick heaps. But ever since doing the breathing, barely at all. So that's fixed that, which has been, well, at least helped. But yeah, the allergies and the motion sickness is a very interesting one. So I'd love to dive. Let's dive deeper into this properly, and then we can report back and see how we go. There was one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I know you've got things to do in your life. Homeopathic immunizations. Yeah. So for again, we've got a little girl, and so that's something that I am aware of, and just in general, how does that work? So the way it was sort of founded, Dr. Isaac Golden is really the figurehead, really around the world, but he's Australian, and he did his thesis on it, his PhD, and that is using, again, the energy harnessed of, let's say, tetanus, and you get that in a pharmacy, you dilute it, succussus, you do the homeopathic process to get the energized tetanus, and you are then ingesting it and exposing the vital force, the body, to the frequency of tetanus so that the body recognizes it already. That is prophylactic, right? So you're already exposed, the body can mount its own little response. Now, when you look around the world, what's so fascinating is some countries fully respect homeopathic immunization. They roll it out as part of their government policy. So
which countries?
So say like Cuba, it's massive. In India, they went door to door with like homeopathics for COVID, like as a prophylactic, like guys, get ready, let's expose the body already so that we don't overwhelm the crap out of these hospitals. But Cuba did one of the biggest studies, like controlled studies ever. This is in 2007 in Cuba, and they actually flew Isaac over at one point. So Fidel Castro, who most people would know as a bit of a dictator, probably not a nice person, he was a big fan of natural medicine. And what they did was they did not have enough vaccines to protect these millions of people from leptospirosis. So every year they have this hurricane season, and the sort of spreading of leptospirosis, it kills a lot of people. So they'd vaccinated one side of, let's say 7 million people. It might be 4 million actually. But anyway, millions of people on one side of the country got vaccinated. And they said
the traditional
vaccines, yeah. And they said, we have nothing to lose if we bring in the homeoprophylaxis, the homeopathic immunization for it. So it was this mad rush. They got all of the main strains of leptospirosis. They made it into a remedy, and they were dispensing it in water door to door for millions of people. It's fascinating when you see the footage of them actually trying to roll it out, like all these people all suited up in the pharmacies, like out bottles of water, taking it out, and they just had them sipping it. People you can't comprehend that getting the frequency exposed, of that virus to the body could actually prepare it for when that hurricane season comes through.
Oh, so this is pre-hurricane season.
This is getting ready. Like, we need to, prophylactic.
Yeah, of course.
And the results are just unambiguous. The homeopathy was not only equivalent, it actually came out superior. And because of that, and the people who reported this in like the medical journals, these are mainstream doctors. They are not homeopaths. They have nothing to gain by saying that homeopathy was really effective. And it's so fascinating because they were often previously published medical journal authors. Like, these people have written a lot of mainstream data. As soon as they wanted to really go for it with the homeopathic data, they couldn't get it published. The BMJ, all of these. It's classic. But even still, you can find the results on PubMed, and they're quite well known. And so Isaac's work, has been phenomenal. And so and even doing, a PhD on it at Swinburne University, you are overseen by like the professors, your sort of conduct, your methodology is going to be scrutinized at the highest level. And even so, the protocol has come through, and like the efficacy of it, par on par with vaccines. And if that's true, why do we risk all of the adverse side effects if we have an equivalent option?
Yeah, well, I think we both can speculate what the answer to that is: money to be made. But so just a little bit of detail about, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but a traditional, so a homeopathic vaccine or immunization, what's the method of action and delivery? How does that work?
So you coat it. So you get the frequency. Let's say you do tetanus, you do measles, you do whooping cough. So you get the pertussis virus, and you want to dilute it and succuss it. So you want to keep it nice and powerful. You then get it either in the drops, the liquid stock, or you sometimes will see the little pilules. They put the tiniest little dose of it. So it is the frequency associated with like whooping cough from an infected person.
Okay.
When the child,
so it's not like a live virus. It's a frequency related to the virus.
Exactly. And diluted, which it's so bizarre, but it makes it more powerful the more you dilute and succuss it. So when you look under the microscope with these different frequencies, when you say immerse them in water, you like drop a drop of it into water, and you look under the microscope at the crystalline structures of that water, it completely changes as a response to the different frequencies associated with it. So like pertussis, like let's say whooping cough, is going to look very different to like measles, and the body is going to get flooded with that frequency. Now, all you need is sublingual. You don't need to inject homeopathic under the tongue. Like the lymph nodes, your body is going to recognize it and produce sort of protective chemistry. Now, going through with all of the studies, just your likelihood of contracting the disease so far significantly reduced, and sort of
So how do they isolate the frequency? How does that? I don't know what that means.
How do they isolate it? So how they tend to make it, let's say with COVID, they would get somebody who was infected, who was sick, and they would get their sputum. So get them to cough up the sick, diseased tissue.
Yeah.
That person was under the influence of COVID. That distortion in that mucus dilutes, succuss. So when we're talking about isolating it homeopathically, you are taking the nanodose of a very sick, infected person, but the body on that energetic level, it knows what to do with that tiny little bit.
Yeah, right. So you're literally taking a little bit of the goop.
Which is almost like with the vaccines, you are giving your body the impetus so it will produce antibodies.
Yes.
It's a very similar process, but also different. But on the note of, making it from the, sick diseased tissue, the number one cold and flu medication in France is called oscillococcinum. Now, this is prescribed by like over 80% of medical doctors. It's their one. If you go to the doctor in Australia and you say, I've got the flu, they might give you like cold and flu meds or, something like that. But in France, they all give oscillococcinum. It's homeopathic. And it's their flu medication, purely homeopathic, these little pills. And people love it and it works. And doctors prescribe it. And if you want to be a homeopath in France, you must also be a medical doctor first. So they don't let just anybody be a homeopath. You must be a medical doctor first. So it's so different, in different countries, what people know about homeopathy. In some, it's really respected. In the Western world, it is suppressed like no other.
Oh, yeah. It absolutely is. So, okay, so that's what I was going to say. So the difference between a homeopathic immunization and a regular standard traditional one is, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they attach, there's some kind of adjuvant added in, which is going to cause distress and harm to the body in order for the immune system to create an immune response to all the other stuff that is in the vaccine. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so, and as you would know, the adjuvants are usually what's causing like the issues. If people had adverse events from certain shots, it's usually that all of the other stuff that's added in, thimerosal, like formaldehyde, aluminium.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Well, I mean, that's really fascinating to know the difference and to know that the homeopathic ones are on par, if not more effective.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to know.
Yeah, because, when you're making this decision for your kids or even for yourself, it is like, it's a massive responsibility. It's like, I'm going to keep you safe. And I'm trying to figure out, looking at all of this data, what is true, like what is documented, because it's like, bloody hell.
And there's so much conflicting information. And but you know what is the truth of the matter is that everybody, regardless on where you stand on this issue, everybody's actually coming from the same place. They want what is best for their family or themselves. They want to make sure their child is protected and healthy and not going to get ill from something that they can prevent.
Yeah.
And they don't want to give them something that is going to make them ill.
Yeah.
The intention is all the same. We're all coming from the same place. So the bickering and the kind of moral high ground is just noise. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing. So just coming to an understanding of what is going to be the best choice for you and what makes the most sense. For me, that's, cutting out the bullshit and just going, okay, what makes the most sense as far as harm reduction on both sides, doing or not doing. What's going to cause the most potential harm? What are the other alternatives? And finding the right answer. I'm so stoked that I've spoken to you about this, because this is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We hired a warehouse manager probably about 6 months ago, and it was important that we got somebody holistic. I didn't mind if they didn't, use homeopathy or anything, but anyway, we naturally just, of course, found the right person. And I was working with her a couple of months since she'd been there, and I said, what got you in the holistic path? And she said, well, my daughter was damaged by a vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine for HPV, when she was like 14. So my perfectly healthy daughter, sporty, academic, everything, started having severe seizures the week after. And she said, I didn't correlate it. I didn't realize. And it wasn't until, she had the second shot, and then it just upped the disease state. It just got so much worse. Now she's fainting. She can't go to school. It was after the third one that I realized actually what had happened. And it's, a lot of damage was done by that vaccine for women all around the world. And she said, it's so, it's interesting for me, because obviously now I'm very much an advocate for like safety around these interventions. And prior to that, I was the one who just thought that they were like absolute, quacks.
Be all and end all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, just in terms of, she was so pro all of that. If she had anybody who was even vaccine hesitant, she just wrote them off, because she just thought her children didn't have any issues in childhood. So she didn't know. And that's the thing. When people don't know, they've never seen that. All they've heard is from like the TV, which the media stations, they're owned largely by pharmaceutical industries. Pharmaceutical industries are allowed to pay our politicians massive donations. And we've seen
such a conflict of interest. It's ridiculous.
We had like the CDC, the Center for Disease, like that one.
Yeah.
The
Center for Disease Control, yeah.
The president of the CDC had shares in Gardasil. And you tell me, like, in what world is that appropriate? When the statistics started to come out, Robert Kennedy Jr. has done a lot of work on this, but he was exposing it that she dumped her shares as soon as this information started to come out. And, there are books written about the HPV vaccine, and it's just, she was allowed to profit, and this is where that narcissistic comment you said earlier, it's people have no empathy for the damage that's done. It's one thing to be ignorant, and I don't blame anybody for being ignorant if they've never been exposed to this information.
Yeah.
But
even if you're one step beyond, even if you've made the effort, a little bit of effort, you're going to be told all that stuff, that it's all good, there's nothing to worry about. So you have to really dig deep to get anything other than that. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's hard to find the truth, and it's confusing and everything. I mean, I have the benefit of seeing people in clinic day to day. So my data collection is my reference point when I'm working with all these mothers who tell me exactly what happened. They're my source. I'm not reading online, so I know what I know, but I don't blame anybody for being very confused or upset by all of the conflicting info. But for somebody to hide the truth, that is where I have a big problem. And there are people out there, like Dr. Isaac Golden said, he teaches in some of my courses, and he said to the group the other day, doctors at this point are either sort of like ignorant fools and like very fools, or they're lying. And that's sort of the point that, we're getting to, is like, if you're going to really bury your head in sand and not look, you can be ignorant. But there are people at the top who are genuinely misleading on purpose.
Yes,
and that's what's sad. And that's what we speak out against. And that's what we have a problem with, really. Controlling information, controlling people. It's not good.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is the thing that has come out with all the COVID stuff. Those two things you talked about, it's like the way that the only rational way to really observe the way that panned out is the people that are telling us what we need to do are either really stupid because they were wrong, because they told us one thing and it didn't work, or they knew that it wasn't going to work and they lied. There's no other option. Those are the two things that happened because that's what they told us. They told us if you take this, you will not get sick, you will not spread it on. Bullshit. That didn't work out. They didn't come out and go, oh, we fucked up. We're really sorry. We made a mistake. We were wrong. We messed up and we're doing everything. No. They've never said that. So which one is it? It's one of two. They either didn't know, so they're incompetent, so they can't be trusted, or they knew and they lied, so they can't be trusted.
Yeah. Either way, we end up in the same position.
The same position. So that's why, so many people are looking for other options, exactly like what you are an expert in. And to sit here with you and to have this conversation and for you to so comfortably and so knowledgeably share all this stuff, like you're either a brilliant liar or you are walking the walk, and it's really exciting for me. And I can't wait to go down this journey with myself and I'm going to bring Laurel with me and my family in general and let's see what we can do in our own lives through your help. It's really exciting.
For sure. I just I was saying to you before, but before I jumped on this call, there was one, and it was just international homeopaths all around the world, and they are looking to put this documentary that they filmed because there are hospitals still operating, like homeopathic hospitals, and they're treating all sorts of things in India. Like they're not under the same laws as we are. There's very strict things about what I can and can't say, la la la.
Yeah.
But for them, it's incredible. So they want to get this documentary on Netflix, and you imagine the exposure. Like we're getting it to a time in the world where homeopathy is coming back. Like I can't believe the resurgence that I've seen in my practice in the last, and it's the last couple of years that it just went crazy because people are like, well, that's not the truth. Now I've got to figure some stuff out for myself. And ultimately, when given the information, people will follow what works. We would not be shipping all over the world if it didn't work. And so people are smart, and you have to let people observe this for themselves. And when it works for you, as it did for me and, so many people that I work with, it's like you don't go back. You continue. You realize that it's the way, really.
Yeah. Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, if it exactly that. If it works, it is what it is. Again, it doesn't matter how society feels about that or what you're told to believe about that. If it works, it works, and that's what I'm interested in. And clearly, so many people are. This is. I hope that thing gets up on Netflix. That would be very cool. Because people are hungry for actual answers. People are tired of being lied to.
I know, and they're realizing we are more than we have been told, and it extends so far beyond health. It's the cliche people would put it, the Great Awakening, but we are awakening to everything that we are, like the human imagination, just consciousness, everything. So I think we are, despite some of the doom and gloom sometimes, I think we're headed for a very bright future.
Yeah, I agree. I'm optimistic too. And pain is growth. It's messy. It's painful. It's going to be uncomfortable. And how long this process is going to take, I don't know. It could be an uncomfortably long time. It could be, long after our kids have grown up. It could be a couple of generations away. It could be 5 years away. It could be a massive shift. Things move pretty quickly these days. Who knows?
Well,
but it's
after the last 3 years, we're like, whoa, a lot can change in 3 years. Yeah.
Yes,
So
exactly.
It could change for the better too.
Exactly. So who knows? But it's happening. It's definitely happening, and it's I really appreciate you coming on, Mel. This has been a fantastic conversation. Where can everyone find you?
So on Instagram is probably where I do the most sort of speaking and teaching there. So that's that homeopath. Other than that, our website, just RMDYcollective.com. That's where, we sell the products, and we've got some courses if people are looking to go deep. But also a lot of people, after hearing this, they often like, I want to see a homeopath. Who can I see? Yeah. There's some people on my website, that original homeopath that I was telling you about that treated me, the amazing one. We're actually starting a school of homeopathy. So he's just taking cases and it's just showing people the whole process. Come in, take the whole case, teach and explain. So if people want to follow that journey, it's the most fun. Truly, like magic. You watch it, and I remember the feeling when I first got into homeopathy and I'm seeing these things happen before my very eyes, and I'm like, what is happening? It feels like magic, like truly the best sort. So yeah, they can follow along there.
Very cool. Very cool. Oh, I'm really excited to go down this path, Mel. This is some good stuff. This has been awesome, Mel. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.